I'm 30F, wed to Brian, 32M, a really great man. At least until lately, our 7 years together have been peaceful. We have been married for 5 and life has been lovely. My family has always been somewhat complicated. When I was 10 years old, my parents split. My mother fled and since then we have not spoken at all. When I was 15, my dad, 55M, drew Diane, 50F. She entered the family with her 28F daughter Melissa. Mostly since Melissa was constantly envious of me, we were never close. She simply made matters worse as she disliked my wonderful relationship with my dad, who has always preferred me. Melissa has always shown a little entitlement and spoiling. Diane cuddles her. She has always sided with Melissa no matter how often there has been dispute or argument. Although my dad attempts to remain impartial, it is clear he is closer to me and has caused many issues over the years. Melissa appears to be carrying this chip on her shoulder on the way our dad treats us differently. To complicate matters, Diane and my dad's son Peter, 14M, is my half-brother. Though the family relationships are equally complex, he is a wonderful child. Though Melissa is an adult now and should be able to manage things better, her dad loves him too and Melissa always feels that she has been pushed to the side. Still, I am a successful business owner, which has simply accentuated the distance separating Melissa from me. She has always been jealous of my connection with our dad and my job. She is a low-level marketing assistant who regularly laments how unfair life is, how she does not have the same chances, etc. I have tried to be encouraging, but it is difficult when she is constantly negative and seeks means of dragging me down. She recently began dating James, 35M, a decent-looking man, but now I'm doubting everything. Even from our early years, Melissa and I never truly got along. Though I suppose it's not unusual for step-siblings to experience some conflict, ours felt to be on a different level. Melissa obviously objected to me from the beginning because of the relationship I had with our dad. She always considered me as competition, hence it was aggravating as I actually wanted a sisterly relationship with her. But it became abundantly evident over time that this was not going to happen. The favoritism of my dad proved unhelpful. He has never hesitated to share with anyone who would listen. He has always been pleased with my successes. Melissa, on the other hand, seemed to be more of a letdown in his eyes, which widened our gulf. Every time something went wrong in her life, she would find a way to point the finger at me or say I had it simpler since our dad loved me more. To be very honest, it was draining. And Diane? No matter what, Melissa's constant cheerleader has been her. Diane would defend Melissa even if she obviously made mistakes. Diane and my dad have had a lot of conflict as well, but he has never been one to squarely face it. To my annoyance, he simply aims to maintain peace, which sometimes means allowing things to lapse. Melissa's jealousy evolved over years into something more poisonous. She usually attempts to minimize my achievements as she has never been happy about any of them. She hardly noticed it when I married Brian and focused entirely on how unfair it was and how alone she was. She laughed at my company when I first started it, stating I only got where I am due to our dad's support. She seems unable to accept my success or happiness, which makes any type of meaningful connection unattainable for us. Notwithstanding all this, I have attempted to keep the peace. I try to include her in activities, hoping it would strengthen our relationship. I do not go out of my way to rub her triumphs in her face. Still, it's never enough. She finds a means to turn whatever I do into something negative no matter what. Since I desire things could be different, it's draining and truly upsetting. My battle with infertility has been among the most agonizing events in my life. Brian and I resolved 3 years ago that we were ready to begin a family. Though our enthusiasm and optimism were high, things didn't go as expected. We visited a reproductive doctor following a year of trying without success, and there we received the news that I have a disorder severely impairing spontaneous conception. Nothing worked, medications, therapies, even IVF that we tried. Every failed effort felt like a kick to the belly and severely affected both of us emotionally. Particularly since we had always imagined a large family, we were heartbroken. Our relationship has suffered much from it. There were times when I felt totally hopeless and the tension and disappointment were intolerable. Melissa's family is among those who know about our hardships. They were all really encouraging. Though he has never been very good with emotional matters, my dad attempted to be there for me in his own manner. Diane offered to assist with all we needed and was more involved. Melissa first appeared to be empathetic, but that was fleeting. She began making tiny digs and remarks with great depth not long ago. She once asked me casually how fortunate I was to be able to concentrate on my profession free from child responsibility. Especially from someone who understood how much I wanted to be a mother. It burned so badly. She seemed to be enjoying my suffering, which more than I could express hurts. Dealing with infertility is difficult enough without someone in your own family rubbing slaves in the wound. Almost as if she were mocking me, Melissa would also mention her own aspirations for children one day. She would discuss how simple she would find it when the time came. How she would have no trouble getting pregnant, and how she was in no hurry as she had all the time in the world. Knowing what I was going through, I couldn't understand why she would say such things. Which were terrible. To be honest, Melissa has always been rather the drama queen. She is single, a low-level marketing assistant, and she regularly grumbles about how her life has not turned out the way she intended. She has always been the kind of person that seeks attention, even if it means blatantly falsifying stories or exaggerating to get it. I can't count the times she has pretended to be unwell. Only the next day when something exciting comes up she suddenly recovers. She recently began seeing James, 35M, and initially I thought it would be great for her. Exactly what Melissa needs. Kind, successful, grounded, he seemed to be a decent man. But as the relationship developed, I began to see some warning signals. Melissa has been pushing James to relocate more quickly than he is comfortable with. First of all, given her past of wanting things for the wrong reasons, her discussion of marriage and children after just a few months of dating seems a tad hurried. Melissa has always had a great need to stay up with me, more like to surpass me. She seems to be unhappy only until she feels as though she is one-upping me in some form. Whether it's with our professions, our relationships, or now considering a family, I have seen it time and time again. It's draining. At one point I'm not sure what more I could do to maintain calm. She has also been known to embellish events seeking compassion. She would make up stories about how harsh her professors were or pretend to have injuries to get out of gym class when she was younger. It's always something, and today it looks like that behavior has persisted into her adult life. She talks endlessly about how demanding her work is, how she feels underappreciated, and how everyone is out to get her. Particularly when you know someone is not being really honest, it can be difficult to sympathize with someone who is constantly acting the victim. James strikes me as a fine man, but I worry about him becoming sucked into Melissa's web. Unlike us, he doesn't know her, hence I worry he could not see the warning signals until it's too late. Still, I'm not very inclined to meddle at the same time. I simply hope things don't spiral out of hand for Melissa's sake as much as for his. Imagine yourself last weekend. Fast forward. Celebrating our 5th wedding anniversary, Brian and I also had an opportunity to let others know my company is growing. We agreed to have a large dinner party inviting close relatives, friends, and some business contacts. Particularly considering all Brian and I have gone through lately, I wanted tonight to be memorable. I spent weeks organizing every element, selecting the ideal cuisine, contracting a professional catering company, and even installing some subdued CCTV cameras for security needs. We just had a couple break-ins in the area, hence I wanted not to take any chances. Everything was supposed to be flawless, and I was eager to tell everyone we know our great news. My parents, Diane, Melissa, Peter, and a handful of our closest friends and business colleagues were on the guest list. Given our past, I was a little dubious about inviting Melissa, but I decided it was the proper thing to do. Moreover, I considered perhaps this would be a chance for us to at last get along, even for one evening. The day the party was scheduled arrived, and I wanted things to go without a hitch so everyone might enjoy themselves. Together, Brian and I checked to ensure every element was flawless. The caterers came early, and we laid a lovely table including candles and flowers. I even bought some pricey wine knowing our visitors would enjoy it. Everyone arriving felt as though all the effort had paid off. Starting with champagne and appetizers, we kicked things off and generally everyone seemed to be having fun. Melissa was also being quite friendly, which I interpreted as encouraging. Thinking perhaps, just maybe, things were looking good, I began to unwind and really appreciate the evening. Until dessert, everything was running perfectly. The caterers presented a beautiful cake, and we were about to make our major business expansion news when Melissa abruptly got up. She blurted out that she had some news of her own instead of the toast or anything I had assumed she would bring. Glancing around the room with this haughtiness, she declared, "I'm pregnant, 3 months along. I pledge you could have heard a pin drop." Everyone, including her boyfriend James, who seemed totally blindsided, was shocked. He glanced at her as though he cannot believe what he was hearing. The range of feelings I experienced at that moment, shock, hurt, anger, all of which struck me simultaneously is difficult for me to even start to explain. Though I have always wanted to make that kind of announcement myself, given all Brian and I have gone through with infertility, I realized that time might never happen. And here was Melissa, grabbing our evening to deliver her bombshell, knowing of my difficulties. Some of our visitors had pitying stares, and that made me wish to vanish. Still, I kept my cool rather than setting out a scene. Though I was dying within, I smiled broadly and complimented her. Although Brian's hand under the table allowed me to relax, I knew he was equally unhappy as I was. Originally scheduled this evening to honor our successes, today it became a celebration of Melissa's pregnancy. I said my congrats, then excused myself and vanished to the bathroom to cool off. I needed 1 minute to collect my ideas and stop the tears from flowing. She stole it entirely from us. It was meant to be our night. Given what we have gone through, I found it incomprehensible why she would act so carelessly. Still, this was Melissa, always seeking to be the center of attention, regardless of cost. Brian and I were still contemplating what had transpired early the next morning. We tried to concentrate on the positives, that is, the nice comments from our friends and the way the business news had been received. But it was difficult to move past the hurt and irritation. Though I hadn't expected to hear from Melissa very soon, there was a loud bang at the door as we were seated for breakfast. When I opened it, Melissa was standing there glaringly angry. Hurrying into the living room, she passed me without waiting. She started a frenzy before I could ask what was going on, charging me for spiking the food at the party to make her sick. She insisted she had been throwing up all night and morning and felt I had done something out of jealousy over her pregnancy. I was totally surprised. Spiking the food? What I was listening to astounded me. She was told that was absurd, that we had professionally catered meals, and that there was no way anything could have been changed. She wouldn't pay attention though. She said that I had to have done something and insisted on seeing the party CCTV footage to clear my name. Melissa was not having it when Brian entered the room trying to cool her down. She was yelling, screaming all kinds of crazy charges, and really I had no idea what to say. That she would even consider me capable of something so sinister infuriated and wounded me. The whole matter is becoming rapidly more dangerous. Should I fail to present Melissa the tape right then and there, Melissa threatened to call the police and press charges. She was behaving totally illogically, and I had no idea what to do. Though another part of me wanted to show her the film merely to shut her down and establish I had done nothing wrong, part of me wanted to throw her out of the house. She wasn't having it when Brian tried to reason with her, saying that perhaps she was simply suffering morning sickness. Nothing we said would make her change her mind. She was sure I had done anything to compromise her pregnancy. Just wanted it to stop. I felt as though I was in some kind of twisted dream. A few more minutes of yelling and accusations later, I at last consented to show her the CCTV film. I thought that was the only approach to persuade her to cool off and leave our peace intact. I called up the recordings from the previous evening and Brian and I guided her to the room housing the film. I kept looking at Melissa as we watched the video, expecting for her to see how ludicrous her charges were. The film captured everything, guests arriving, supper being presented and everyone having fun. Nothing out of the usual, no odd behavior, and most definitely no proof I had touched the food. Melissa doubled down nevertheless, instead of retreating. She began dissecting every minute detail in the video, alleging that certain attendees appeared uneasy or that perhaps the caterers had done at my request was wrong. She was clearly not going to let this go. She was grabbing at straws. She then turned to me out of nowhere and declared, if I didn't confess to what I'd done, she would take this to the next level. She was discussing urgent charges, visiting law enforcement and even suing me for what she claimed to have been an attempt to damage her unborn child. Never had I seen her like this before. So enraged, so resolved to have me the villain in her narrative. When Brian tried to step in once more, implying that Melissa might be simply overwhelmed with all that was happening in her life, she was not having it. She was dead focused on having me pay for something I had not even done. I didn't understand why she seemed to be on a mission to ruin me. I became stuck. She would assume I was hiding something if I hadn't shown her the footage, but even with it, she wasn't happy. I had no idea what else I could do to prove my innocence, and the idea of her dragging this out in front of courts or the police horrified me. I simply wanted the whole thing to stop. I was totally lost. I'm thus left wondering, Reddit, how I should address this. Should I keep trying to reason with Melissa, or should I enable her to forward with her threats and handle the consequences? All of this baffles and hurts me greatly. I have no idea what to do. Update 1. Hey Reddit, thanks for the guidance and encouragement. Things have turned wild, and I have to tell what happened next. I chose to attentively check the CCTV footage following Melissa's tantrum to be sure I had not missed anything. Though I expected nothing, I was driven to clear my name and put this entire disaster behind me. Something struck my eye as I was viewing the footage. James, Melissa's boyfriend, stood close to the drink table during the party. It was delicate, but when Melissa turned away, I saw him slide something into her drink. What the fuck was happening? Several times I watched the video to be sure I wasn't seeing things, but it was obvious. James had clearly placed something in her drink. I started to shock. What had he done? Explain why. Though I knew I had to face him about it, I also realized this would cause even more upheaval. I requested James to visit when I phoned him. Though he sounded tense, he agreed. I wasted no time when he got here. Showing him the video, I insisted on an explanation. At first he tried to deny it. But when he realized there was no going around it, he finally admitted. James owned up to having tainted Melissa's drink with Plan B. She had been pressuring him to have a baby, he said, and he wasn't ready for that kind of dedication. Melissa reportedly had been lying to him about using birth control and he freaked out upon learning of it. In a flash of fear, he dropped the pill into her drink, trying to stop the pregnancy without facing her squarely. I said nothing at all. Her boyfriend drugged her to stop her from becoming pregnant. For actual? James confessed, and I had no idea what to do going forward. Furious, outraged, and even a little afraid of what this would imply for all the people involved. Though I knew it would destroy Melissa, I realized I couldn't keep this to myself. She deserved the truth. I urged Melissa to come over when I phoned her. She was still furious when she got there, most likely anticipating another argument about the meal. But her face went white when I told her what James had done. She first just stared shocked at me without saying anything. She first tried to dispute it, claiming I must have somehow edited the recording, when I showed her the video. But the data was clearly there, and finally she had to confront reality. She moved from denial to rage when it sank her at last. She began yelling at James, calling him every name found in a book. She was tossing stuff and blaming him for destroying her life, so it was a full-fledged tantrum. Then in the middle of her tirade, she blurted out something even more startling. She acknowledged her lying about her pregnancy. Fearful James was about to leave, she claimed she made up the pregnancy to try to trap him back into her house. She reasoned that he would have to commit totally if he thought she was expecting his child. I stood absolutely stunned. Here I was believing she was really pregnant and that she had told me at my party out of some sick craving for attention, but it was all a lie, a hopeless, pitiful attempt to control James. And now her lie had exploded in front of her in the worst conceivable manner. Then Melissa turned on me and started accusing me of destroying everything. She said she could have maintained the lie and things would have been better if I hadn't shown her the video. It still astounded me. Even after all she had done, she was still working to twist events to make me the bad guy. My dad and Diane arrived in the thick of this turmoil as if things couldn't get bad. Melissa apparently had called them on her way over, screaming about how I was out to get her, so they came over to cool things up. Still, they strolled in exactly as Melissa was heading off on James. Things were anarchy. Diane launched Melissa's defense right away, asking what I had done to irritate her daughter. Diane would not hear me trying to explain everything. James spiking the drink. Melissa lying about the pregnancy. Saying I had always been jealous and was only searching for a means to destroy Melissa's life. She accused me of setting her up. My dad, on the other hand, first said nothing. After seeing the tape and listening to James, he turned to Melissa with an expression I had never seen before. Not even does disappointment start to cover it. She had done, lying about something as significant as a pregnancy, controlling everyone around her, and then turning on me for revealing the truth, something he couldn't believe. My dad backed me in a dispute with Melissa for the first time. He advised her to accept accountability for her behavior as what she did was unacceptable. Of course, Melissa did not respond particularly well. She began to cry, claiming that she is always the one blamed while I am treated like the golden kid and that no one else ever supports her. Diane took great offense at my dad for not standing up for Melissa. She charged him with deserting their family and enabling me to turn him against them. With Melissa screaming in the background, the whole event descended into a protracted quarrel between my dad and Diane. It was a horrible catastrophe. All I wanted was everyone to go. They finally did. Melissa was still sobbing and Diane glared at me like I was the devil when my dad advised Melissa and Diane to head home and cool off. I was utterly exhausted. All I wanted was a decent anniversary party and business news, and suddenly this catastrophe had my family in disarray. Right now I'm at a complete loss, hence I could really appreciate some guidance on how to handle this. Update 2. Good Reddit, I'm back offering more updates. Since that turbulent day, things have become convoluted, and I am still trying to make sense of it all. Word got around among our relatives and friends once the dust settled from the major disclosure on James spiking Melissa's drink. Though you know how these things go, people talk, I did not want it. Concerned about the situation, business associates and a few close friends contacted me. While some were encouraging, others seemed concerned about how this mistake may damage my company's standing. Given something as serious as accusations of spiking cocktails and lying about a pregnancy, I suppose that makes sense. No one wants to be connected with scandal. Though within I was slightly panicking, I told them everything was under control. Having this drama leak into my work life is the last thing I need. Regarding Melissa, her standing has suffered greatly. Those who attended the party, especially those who personally heard her announcement, are now challenging all she says. She has been avoiding social media, which is unusual for her. Some of her shared acquaintances have also distanced themselves. She enjoys the attention normally, but right now it seems as though she is hiding. Regarding family dynamics, things have become even more convoluted. James split from Melissa soon after everything became clear. Unable to handle the aftermath, he was naturally enraged over being controlled. Naturally, Melissa blames me for the breakup. She says they would still be together if I hadn't showed her the film. Classic Melissa, dodging accountability instead of assigning guilt. About the whole thing, my dad is truly conflicted. Though Melissa's behavior calls for a soft spot for him usually, this time he seems to be questioning it. I never would have imagined him saying that, but he has been discussing severing relations with her. It has severely damaged his relationship with Diane, who is still protecting Melissa. Things between them are, at least, tense, and I worry it may cause further major problems in their marriage. Given all that has transpired, I have been giving legal action against James Great Thought. Though it was under Plan B, what he did, spiking Melissa's drink, was utterly out of line. Speaking with a lawyer, they advised me that things may get complicated even though they stated I have a case should I wish to file charges. Given the whole affair has gone public, James might countersue for slander, particularly now. It's a lot to consider and I'm not sure if the extra stress is worth it. Melissa has been flitting about threats of a lawsuit against me for emotional suffering at the same time. She is claiming great mental trauma from my showing of the CCTV footage and revealing of her lies. Although it's ridiculous, the attorney encouraged me to treat it seriously should she choose to act. If it comes to a countersuit, we are looking at possibilities. But to be honest, the thought of attending court over this makes me ill. I simply want this dream to fade. To aggravate things, Diane is entirely on Melissa's side. Just ridiculous is her insistence on my dad acting legally against me. Though it's driving a gulf between him and Diane, my dad is happily not entertained by that thought. More frequently staying at our house, he is trying to avoid the stress at home. Though I hate to see him trapped in the middle, I have no idea how to correct it. I am currently attempting to concentrate on safeguarding my company and myself. Just in case things get more intense, I have added more security devices at home and at the office. I have also begun recording everything, every contact, every threat. So I have evidence should this go before court. Although it seems overkill, I would much prefer to be safe than regret. Edit 1. To try to save what remains of our family, my dad advised family therapy. He is eager to mend things with Diane and, I believe, still harboring hope that we may somehow mend our connection with Melissa. Though I realized how much the concept meant to him, I wasn't excited about it. I consented nevertheless. Diane grudgingly consented as well, although Melissa first flatly objected. She finally agreed to one session, simply to hear everyone out, after some persuasion though. The session turned out clearly as a fiasco. The therapist tried to mediate, but Melissa was antagonistic from the time we arrived. She spent much of the time portraying the victim, blaming me for destroying her life and asserting that I had always been envious of her. She maintained that James and her would be happy and planning their future together if I hadn't intervened. It was all about how I had exposed her and about how unfair it was that she was the one suffering as a result. Diane was not improved either. She blamed me for boiling the pot and generating all this turmoil, shielding Melissa at every turn. She even had the gall to advise me to have handled things privately and kept silent about the CCTV evidence to spare Melissa from humiliation. What I was hearing astounded me. I was supposed to simply let Melissa carry on with her lies and manipulation to keep the peace. Although my dad attempted to be impartial, he once lost his cool. Melissa was advised by him to own her behavior and cease attributing her troubles to others. Diane interpreted that as a betrayal, and the two of them descended into a shouting war. The therapist sought control, but it was too late. Melissa bolted, screaming that she was done with all of us, and Diane trailed her out. My dad was seated there looking disappointed at the end of the session. He said he didn't know what else to do and that perhaps it was time to realize things wouldn't get better. He apologized to me. Seeing him so distraught broke my heart and made me understand that this could be beyond save. For Melissa, things have only gotten worse following the catastrophic therapy session. She lost her job, according to what I heard via common friends. She seems to have had unpredictable behavior, missing work or arriving late. At last her manager had enough and let her leave. Though I'm not surprised, it is nevertheless depressing to see her descend this way. She has also been disseminating online rumors about me. She has been tweeting accusing me of ruining her life and turning our family against her. She even made ludicrous hints suggesting I edited the footage to make James seem bad. Although most people who know the whole truth are not purchasing it, some seem to be devouring it. It hurts, and it makes me wonder whether I should have kept things private even though I know that would have only served to hasten the unavoidable. My dad is bordering on insane with concern. Melissa has not responded when he tried getting in touch. Naturally upset with him for not supporting Melissa more, Diane blames him for driving her away. Their marriage might not survive this. Things between them are precariously hanging. Diane's hard set against my dad's even talking about stopping Melissa's financial support, expecting it will drive her to get her life together. I am at the very end of it. Though it's not that easy, I have thought about totally severing relations to Melissa. She is still family, and despite all, I find myself thinking about her always. I cannot, however, continue to let her pull everyone else down. I have begun researching legal choices to guard against the falsehoods she is disseminating online. Though my attorney is counseled to write a cease and desist letter, I am unsure. Though I can't allow her to keep lying about me, I also don't want to let things get much more escalated. Update 3. 6 months later. Hey Reddit. After everything fell apart 6 months ago, I at last have some excellent news to report. Following all the tension, turmoil, and emotional roller coasters, something wonderful happened. I discovered I'm pregnant. And it occurred organically, against all chances, not through IVF or any other procedure. Though Brian and I are over the moon, given everything that has transpired with Melissa, we have been careful about who we inform. We agreed to keep it under wraps until I reached into my second trimester. We at last had something to celebrate after years of heartache and disappointment, but concurrently we harbored an underlying anxiety about Melissa's reaction should she find out. Since the whole episode with James, she has been out of control. The last thing we wanted was for her to find a means of ruining this for us too. We have kept the pregnancy under wraps, only informing a small number of close friends and intimate relatives. When we told Dad, he was overjoyed and has been quite helpful. Diane, on the other hand, responded somewhat inconsistently. She seemed a little aloof as well as pleased for us. She still finds it difficult to deal with everything that transpired with Melissa, so it is influencing her attitude to my news. Though there is conflict, Brian and I are emphasizing the good. We have begun organizing the nursery and creating baby arrival plans. At last, being in this place after all we have gone through relieves us. Though I'm trying to be hopeful, I can't say the anxiety of anything going wrong has totally vanished. We knew it would be difficult as we neared the time to tell the rest of the family about the pregnancy. We made a conscious choice not to invite Melissa, even though we wanted to arrange a small private party with just our closest family members, my dad, Diane, Peter, and some friends. We felt leaving her out of it was safer and less taxing after all that had transpired. The day of the conference arrived and I felt both anxious and thrilled. After everyone had finished our modest supper, Brian and I got up to make our announcement. As I told everyone the news, my heart was pounding, but the response was just what we could have asked for. Peter was delighted at the prospect of being an uncle, while my dad was ecstatic and leaped to hug us both. Though I could see she was holding back a little, even Diane grinned and congratulated us despite her recent distancing. Diane inquired whether we had told Melissa, and there was a period of awkwardness following the initial enthusiasm. Everyone in the room was clearly tense waiting for my response. We hadn't told her yet, I said, and with everything that has transpired, we weren't sure how to approach it. Diane appeared torn while my dad nodded in comprehension. She pulled back, most likely thinking it wasn't the proper time, even though I wanted her to offer Melissa over. With everyone toasting to the new family addition, we ended the evening on a positive note. It seemed like a turning point, as though perhaps we were at last past all the drama and suffering. The news got out the following day. Although we hadn't yet put anything on social media, in our family word of mouth travels quickly. Not long after, I began receiving texts from friends and relatives all wishing well. I knew it was just a matter of time before Melissa found out, even as I was savoring the optimism and trying to keep focused on the happiness of the moment. Later on that evening, sure enough, my dad called. He seemed tense and mentioned Melissa had learned about the pregnancy through common connections. She was enraged, he said, outraged that we hadn't informed her straight and that she had to learn through someone else. He cautioned me that she might show up at our place. He was right. Melissa showed up at our house that very night, exactly as my dad had cautioned. As Brian and I were relaxing from the day and savoring a quiet moment together, we heard pounding on the front door. I recognized it even before I unlocked the door. Melissa looked angry, almost unhinged as I let her in. She launched her tirade without wasting any time. She stated it was obvious I was trying to eradicate her from the family and accused me of purposefully keeping her off the announcement. She continued on about how unjust it was, how she had gone through so much, and how I was rubbing my pregnancy in her face. She wasn't having any of it when I attempted to remain cool and explain that we had kept the pregnancy under wraps for a purpose and that we were going to inform her once we were ready. She persisted in saying that I had done this to pay her back off for what James had done. Sadly, she was essentially rewriting history to present herself as the victim, therefore painting a picture of nothing new. The exchange descended rapidly into a yelling match. As the baby's aunt, she insisted she had a right to be involved and asked to be a part of her life. But considering all that has happened, Brian and I had already decided to create some strict limits. We explained to her that although we wouldn't cut her off entirely, we wanted time and space to concentrate on our new family free from continual upheaval. She finally lost it entirely at that. Melissa began yelling that we were isolating her, that we were attempting to take away the only family she had left, and that she would make our lives terrible if we allowed her to participate. Brian intervened, reminding her she should go and that should she keep threatening us, we would discuss obtaining a restraining order. She hurled herself and slammed the door behind her. Having to threaten legal action against my own stepsister merely to preserve the peace in my family astounded me. Melissa's reaction made Brian and I realize we had to make some difficult choices. We filled my dad in on what had transpired when we spoke. Though I could see he was very depressed by the whole situation, he was not surprised. Although he has always strived to keep the family together, he also acknowledged that this time things had gone too far. My dad totally approved of our choice to impose limits on Melissa. He even advised us to think about temporarily cutting off our interaction with her until she receives the care she obviously requires. Diane, though, told a different tale. She contacted me, obviously disturbed when she learned what had transpired. Saying Melissa was only going through a difficult period and that cutting her off would only make things worse, she begged me to rethink. Diane didn't seem to get my explanation, that we were merely establishing limits for our own sanity rather than cutting her off entirely. She insisted that families should stick together no matter what, but I believe she is in denial about the harm Melissa's behavior has caused. Ultimately, Brian and I agreed to carry out our strategy. Melissa is only involved in our life when absolutely required. We are keeping minimum touch with her. At our house, we have also added more security devices in case she attempts another wild pull-off. Though I wanted things to be, I have to give my expanding family's safety and well-being top priority. Regarding my dad and Diane, their relationship is now considerably more tense. My dad has been spending more time away from home, lodging with friends or visiting our house. Diane is still trying to keep everything together, but I can tell the tension is wearing her down as well. Though I'm not sure what will happen with them, I hope they can sort things out without totally separating themselves. Right now, I'm mostly concentrating on my pregnancy and getting ready for our baby to arrive. Though it's difficult when it feels like everything is precariously balanced, I'm trying to remain upbeat and keep the drama at a distance. I simply want to savor this period without thinking about the next family catastrophe just waiting around. Update 4. 1 year later. Hey Reddit. It's been a year since my previous update, and I'm glad life has turned around much needed. Few months back, Brian and I welcomed a healthy baby daughter into the world. Emily is absolutely flawless, we called her. Given all the tension I had during my pregnancy, it was great relief when the birth went well and Emily and I were both healthy. Brian has been a really outstanding parent. He is hands-on with everything from late-night feeds to diaper changes and utterly smitten with Emily. It has deepened our relationship even more, and I would most want to have him at my side. About the rest of the family, things have been challenging but under control. With the continuous drama involving Melissa and Diane, my dad has been a loving grandpa visiting our house practically daily to see Emily. Diane has been trying to be more involved, to her credit. She's been trying to be a good grandma, and I'm trying to meet her halfway to help to keep the peace even if there is still some friction between us. Turning to Melissa's issue. Following the conflict a year ago, we stayed away as scheduled. Melissa first found it difficult. She kept snapping out on social media and made a few more attempts to get up unannounced. But some months ago something changed. Unbelievably, Diane persuaded Melissa to begin treatment. Though I had low expectations from it, Melissa seems to be at last making some development. My dad claims Melissa has been routinely attending treatment and has even begun to admit some of her prior actions. She contacted me a few weeks ago to really apologize rather than to assign blame or accusations. Though it was a brief note, it seemed honest. She said she was working on herself and realized she had been acting out of envy and hurt. She stated she hoped we might have a relationship eventually, even if it would take time, not asking for forgiveness. Though I was careful to reply, finally I responded briefly thanking her for getting in touch. I told her I'm willing to restore our connection, but it would have to be slow and under my terms. She has thus so far shown respect, more than I would have expected. Melissa seems to be doing well generally and also started a new career. She's not returning to her former self, but she is displaying maturity that I really never would have expected. Though still on guard, I am gently hopeful. Though I'm not ready to let her back into my life completely and trust won't be established overnight, I'm hoping this could be the beginning of something wonderful. I suppose that is it. I appreciate all of your support and counsel throughout the past year. Though it's been an unusual road, I'm glad to have somewhere to share it all. If something noteworthy occurs, I will keep you informed. But for now I'm simply looking forward to savoring life with my small family and seeing where the future leads us. My fiancé demanded I put his family first, even at the cost of my sister's health. Now I'm reconsidering everything. Original post, October 25, 2023. Throwaway as my work friends are on my main and they don't know this is going on. Also, it is obligatory that this is on mobile, so spelling and grammar will be poor. This is a long one, but I'll try and keep it as short as possible. I, 28F, got engaged to my partner of 7 years, Rob, 29M, in May. Both sides of our family were really happy about this and we had a big family meal 2 weeks after getting engaged. His brother lives 250 miles away and couldn't get here for that meal, so we decided to have a meal just for his family in late June when his brother would be back for the weekend. This weekend was arranged long before we got engaged, so he wasn't back just for the meal. Earlier this year my sister Kim, 32F, got a serious eye infection that very quickly turned into an ulcer, which scarred her cornea and left it at a high risk of a perforation. She needed a corneal graft, but her surgeon was away for 4 weeks, so she was going to have to wait until he got back to have it. However, her eye didn't hold and it perforated the day I was supposed to be going to the family meal with R's brother. Kim's wife was at work and had her phone turned off and our mom was away with our stepdad. So when Kim called me to let me know what was happening, I knew she would be at the hospital on her own. I immediately talked to my boss and he let me go early so Kim wasn't on her own. I texted Rob to let him know what was going on and he texted me back to send Kim his love and to remind me about the meal that night. I ignored the comment about the meal as it was the last thing on my mind. Once I got to the hospital, I was taken back into a room where Kim was, to be greeted by 3 doctors and 2 nurses rushing around trying to help Kim. I was then informed that she needed to have an emergency operation to have her eye glued or else she would lose it. The problem was that they didn't have a surgeon at that hospital that could do it and she needed to go to another hospital an hour and a half away. They asked if she would need transportation or if I could take her. I said I would take her. Once we got to the other hospital, we were told that she would be having the operation at 5:30 p.m. I knew then that I wouldn't make dinner and text Rob to let him know. He flipped out and basically told me to leave Kim at the hospital and have her wife pick her up after the op was done. At this point, I still hadn't been able to get a hold of Kim's wife. I told him that wasn't going to happen and that he was out of order to even ask me to do that. I then texted his mom and told her what was going on. She was really supportive and told me to stay with Kim and let her know how the op goes. A dinner can be rescheduled, Kim's health can't. I also spoke with his brother who was equally understanding. I stayed with Kim, her operation was a success and I got her back home about 9 p.m. Her wife had ordered some Chinese and offered me some, which I happily accepted as I hadn't eaten since lunch. With that I didn't get home till about 11 p.m. and Rob was already asleep. Rob was very short with me for days after, and we ended up having a huge fight where he told me that I should have put his brother and family before Kim. He said he was embarrassed to go to the meal without me. I responded that I was embarrassed he thought I would put a meal before my sister's health. This led to another week of awkwardness between us before we finally sat down and we sorted it out. Or so I thought. 8 weeks ago Kim got her graft, and so far everything is going really well with it. On Saturday his brother was here, so we went out for dinner with his family. His family were all asking about how Kim was doing, and I showed them a picture of the stitches in her eye. I thought that everything had gone really well until we got home, and he got really angry, saying that I shouldn't have brought up Kim's health issues and I shouldn't have shown them the picture. I argued that they'd asked about her and asked to see the picture. It ended with him telling me that I needed to put him and his family before Kim or else we weren't going to work. His family will come before mine once we are married, so I should get used to it. I went upstairs and packed a bag. I'm now at my mum's house and he's been bombarding me with texts and calls since I left. I do love him, but I will never put his family above my own family's health. I feel like he's expecting me to spend every holiday with his family and put their wants above my family needs, which won't happen. I'm very close to my sister and my mum. That's not going to change. So I don't really know how to move forward, or if I even want to. Has anyone experienced anything like this before? If so, how did you deal with it? TLDR. My fiancé got mad that I missed dinner with his family because my sister needed emergency surgery and I was the only one available to take her. He is now insisting that I put his family before my own. I don't know how to move forward with him. Edit. For some reason it won't let me do a full update post even on my own page, so I'm just going to add it to here. Thank you so much for everyone that commented. I replied to as many as I could, but I read all of them. Warning, this is going to be longer than the original post. A lot has happened. TLDR. For those that just want a quick update, I left him and he's out of my house. His mum is seriously pissed at him and his brother has gone no contact with him for the foreseeable future. For those that want a longer version. Once I decided to end things with him, I knew that the main issue would be getting him out of my house. I own the house outright. My grandma died 5 years ago and left her house to my mum, who sold it and split the money between me and my sister. I then bought my house with that money about a year after she died. I got in touch with my stepdad's friend, who was a landlord the day after I wrote my original post, who then put me in touch with his solicitor. He didn't have time to see me in person that day, but we did have a phone call where he gave me my options. In the UK we have something called a Section 8 notice. This is a 14-day eviction notice, and the solicitor said this would be the quickest way to get him out. However, he could try and contest it if he wanted to, which would lead to court dates and could take months. I asked him to draw up the notice and date it for Friday, the next day. I'd already made the decision to end things with him after work on Friday, so that he could have the weekend to sort through his emotions before work on Monday. On Friday morning I texted Rob and asked him to meet with me at our local pub after work. He quickly agreed. Not only is the pub a public space, but my stepdad and a few of his work friends go in there every Friday after work for a few pints, so I knew he would be there to step in if I needed him. Thank you for suggesting this, Redditors. I also picked up the eviction notice on my lunch break, so I was ready to give it to him. Cost £250 but was worth it. When I got to the pub, Rob was already there and my stepdad was standing at the bar with his workmates. I sat down with Rob and got straight to the point. I told him that it was over. I couldn't be with someone who didn't give me any support when I was going through one of the scariest moments of my life and expected me to drop my family for him. It didn't matter what excuses he could come up with. I wasn't interested. I'd made up my mind and we were done. He stared at me in shock for what felt like an hour but was probably only a minute or so. He then started saying I couldn't be serious. We'd been together for 7 years and I was throwing it all away. I could never find another guy like him. I responded to the last comment with, I don't want a guy like you. That's why I'm ending it. I need someone who will support me when times get tough, not get annoyed that the world isn't bowing down to what he wants. I then handed him an envelope with the eviction notice in and my engagement ring. I told him I was giving him a few weeks to find a place and be out of my house. Then I stood up and walked over to my stepdad, who had bought me a much-needed drink, and stayed with him until my ex left, still looking in shock. I knew he wouldn't approach me whilst I was with my stepdad, as he has always been a little scared of him. This is obviously a very condensed version of what happened. Once I got back to my mum's house, I had one single text from him saying he wasn't moving out and was going to contest the eviction until I'd come to my senses and got back with him. We are not over, was how he ended the text. I just turned my phone off and decided to deal with the legal side of things on Monday. There was nothing else I could do. Saturday morning I woke up and turned my phone back on and had another text from him saying that he would move out if I paid him £10,000 as that's what he'd paid towards bills whilst he had lived at the house. He paid for half the electric, gas, Wi-Fi and Sky package. Note, the Sky package is only as expensive as it is because he has to have every sports channel known to man, so his half literally just paid for the sports channels. I'd already asked the solicitor about this though, and he'd assured me that I didn't owe him any money as he hadn't contributed to a mortgage or any renovations of the house, it was just general expenses. He also knew that I don't have £10,000 just lying around. Let's say I was irritated by this and decided to ring his mum to see if she could talk some sense into him. I'll call his mum Sandra to make it easier. She was appalled by what I told her and said she would speak to him. She called me back about an hour later and asked me to meet her at the house. Rob was on an away day to watch his football team play and wouldn't be back till about 10 p.m. so I knew he wasn't there. I met her at the house with Kim, and Sandra said that Rob's brother was on his way back home and they would have Rob out by the following afternoon. She hadn't even spoken to Rob, just his brother, but she promised he would be out. Sandra then asked me to walk her through the house showing her exactly what was his and what wasn't so he didn't take anything that didn't belong to him. The next morning I got a text from Rob calling me all the names under the sun for getting his mom and brother involved. I blocked him and a couple of hours later, Sandra texted me to let me know he was out and staying with her. I thanked her and she told me that she would like to stay in contact and I happily agreed to this. I went back to my house after work on Monday, changed the alarm code and my stepdad changed all the locks for me. My stepdad is also arranging for a friend of his to install cameras around the outside of the house. This will be done over the weekend. Sandra rang me on Tuesday asking if we could meet up as she had some things she wanted me to know. So we met for lunch that day. It was at this time that she told me her ex was a controlling a-hole who was incredibly selfish and the selfishness was what she had seen in Rob for so long. That's why she had commented on him being like his father, but she had hoped that was the extent of Rob's attitude and he hadn't picked up his dad's controlling behavior, which to be fair, he hadn't up until this whole episode. She had left Rob's dad after he had punched Rob's brother in the face when he was 14 and Rob was 10. He had never laid a hand on her or their sons before, but one time was enough and she left with the boys. To her knowledge her ex had never reached out to speak to Rob or his brother and they hadn't spoken to their father in years. I didn't know any of this, all I had been told was that their dad wasn't in the picture and hadn't been for a long time, but Sandra had thought I knew and that's why she hadn't told me before. However, she had found out on Sunday night that Rob was back in contact with his father and had been for the past year. His dad had been putting lots of thoughts into Rob's head about how he is the man of the house and his family is all that matters. This had fed into Rob's selfish tendencies and had amplified them tenfold. Sandra said that she had told him to find somewhere else to stay ASAP as she couldn't even look him in the face. Then Rob and his brother had a huge argument that ended with his brother telling him that as long as Rob is in touch with their dad, then he will have zero contact with him. Even going so far as to tell him to spend Christmas with their dad because Sandra is going to his house and Rob isn't welcome. When Sandra took Rob's brother's side in all this, Rob flew into a rage and said he would move in with his dad. He then left the house, but came back a couple of hours later looking like he'd been crying. Turns out that his dad doesn't want him living with him and basically said he could be on the streets for all he cares. He's not putting a roof over a grown man's head. Sandra thinks that Rob is now starting to realize everything he has lost due to him listening to his dad and has seen his dad's true colors. Sandra is incredibly disappointed in him, but he's her son so she is trying to be there for him as best as she can. However, she still wants him out as she doesn't trust him anymore. His brother still won't have anything to do with him. She has also told him to stay the hell away from me as I don't need to be brought into this and he has promised her that he will. Only time will tell if that's true, but I do have him blocked on everything and if he turns up at the house I will just call the police to get rid of him. The more Sandra told me about what had been going on behind my back, the more resolute I became about wanting nothing to do with him. I never want to see him again, if I can help it. So all in all Rob's life is a shit show, but as long as he stays away from me then I don't care. I've been spending a lot of time with my sister and her wife as well and my mom and stepdad which has been great. I've never really been close to my stepdad, but this has brought us a lot closer together which has been one huge positive out of all this. I'm not exactly happy right now, but I'll get there. There's still a lot of feelings that I need to unpack and it will take time to move on from this whole situation. I don't think I will be dating for a while. I need to really get over all this and don't want to dump this on anyone else right now. For all those asking how Kim is doing, she's doing great. Had a hospital appointment on Monday and her consultant said her eye is healing, in his words, marvelously. So that's a relief. Thank you to everyone that reached out to me. I hope there won't be any need to update this again, so this should be my final update. For telling my ex that it's not my fault that he's homeless. November 26, 2023. So I 28 have posted on relationship advice before about my now ex 29M. The post and update is in my profile, but basically my ex-fiancé wanted me to put his family before mine even at the cost of my sister's health. I ended up breaking up with him over it and he was forced to move in with his mom, who then found out that he had been in touch with his abusive dad who was twisting his view on how a relationship should work. Last I heard was that his mom was kicking him out as she would not have anyone in her house that was in contact with her ex, and that he had tried to go live with his dad, but his dad had refused. I was completely NC with him, so his mom was the one that had told me this. I'll call my ex Rob and ex-mom Sandra to make things easier. I hadn't heard from Rob in weeks, but yesterday he showed up at my house. I had the chain on my door so opened it with that still attached, no way would I let him in. He basically told me that he had nowhere to live. His mom isn't speaking to him and his dad won't put a roof over a grown man's head, his words not mine. He asked if I would take him back or at least let him live with me. No way in hell would I get back with him, and getting him out the first time only went easy because his mom stepped in to help. He had threatened to take me to court knowing that if he did it could take months to get him out, and then said he would only move if I gave him £10,000. I contacted his mom, who was furious about that, and she turned up with his brother and forced him out. I told him that there was zero possibility of him ever living with me again and that we were 100% over. He started shouting at me and calling me all sorts of names, so I threatened to call the police if he didn't leave and shut the door. I have cameras all over my house so I caught everything he did and said on camera and saved it to a USB just in case. He then went crying to all our mutual friends and managed to get back to his mom. She called me and asked what happened. I told her and she then informed me that she had put her house up for sale and was moving 300 miles away to be nearer her other son. She and Rob had a huge argument about this and she finally kicked him out. Since then he's been couch surfing, but with Christmas coming up, his friends aren't really happy with having him on their couches when they have kids and are meant to be enjoying the festive season. He's been kicked out of 3 friends' houses in 10 days. She told me I was right to refuse him, but I've since had other friends say that they feel sorry for them, and that I can just let him stay in my spare room until he's back on his feet. I then asked them to put him up, but they said they would but don't have room, and if they had a spare room like me then they would let him stay. My family and his are on my side, but I'm starting to doubt myself with what a couple of my friends have said. So Reddit, AITA? Edit. Just a quick edit as I'm going to bed. I've just spoken with the wife of one of Rob's friends and she's asked to meet me on my lunch break tomorrow. Apparently, Rob stayed with them for 2 nights before she kicked him out and there's more going on than what I know of. She's going to tell me the full story tomorrow, but told me that I shouldn't let him anywhere near me and that he's staying in A&B so he does at least have a roof over his head right now. I'll try to update after I've spoken to her. Update, November 27th, 2023. So I posted yesterday about my ex turning up at my house wanting me to let him move back in with me. I said no, but a couple of friends thought I should let him and that messed with my head. Rob is my ex. A few people told me to change my lock etc. I did that and changed my alarm code, as well as my stepdad got his friend to put up 4 cameras around my house. I'm also going to start shutting the gate so that no one can walk up to the house without ringing the bell there first. I put in an edit that I was going to meet with one of Rob's friends' wives for lunch today, and I have to say that it was informative for sure. I'll call her Nat, 30F, and her husband Zach, 29M. So I went to meet her on my lunch break at a cafe near my work. It's a place that a lot of my co-workers go to and I know the staff there as well. A few Redditors thought that she might bring Rob with her, so I wanted it to be somewhere I feel comfortable and have backup if needed. Turns out that I didn't need to bother about that. When I got to the cafe, Nat was there on her own. I grabbed some lunch and a drink and sat with her. We went through the usual small talk before she started telling me what had been going on. Rob rang Zach on Thursday morning saying he had nowhere to go and could he stay with them for a few days. Zach spoke to Nat and they agreed he could stay in their guest room. Rob went to their house after work and they had a long talk where Rob told them he has a flat lined up, but can't move in till January. Zach and Nat agreed to let him live with them until January as long as he followed some basic rules and paid for his own food. The rules were things like, no bringing women back there, and if he went out drinking he had to be quiet when he got back so he didn't wake their daughter who's 6. He agreed to all this and paid for a Chinese for them all that night. The next day after work Rob went to meet his dad in the pub for a few pints. When Zach and Nat went to bed Rob still wasn't home. They were woken up at about 2 in the morning by Rob arguing with a woman. Apparently, Rob had met this woman in a bar, took her back to Zach and Nat's house, got his pleasure and then told her to get dressed and fuck off once he was done. She had gotten angry, which started an argument where Rob was saying some horrific shit to her. Nat took the woman downstairs and got her a taxi, while Zach stayed upstairs arguing with Rob. Once Nat had got rid of the woman, she went back upstairs and tried to calm Zach and Rob down. At this point, Rob decided to take out his frustrations on Nat, calling her a bitch and telling her to do something useful and make him a sandwich before bursting out laughing like he'd made the funniest joke ever. This made Zach lose it and pinned Rob to the wall by his throat. Side note, Rob isn't a fighter at all, whereas Zach was an amateur boxer in his youth and can handle himself well. Nat managed to get Zach to let him go and Rob was shoved in the guest room and told to sleep off the alcohol. It's a miracle that Nat's daughter didn't wake up during this. The next morning Nat got their daughter ready and went to her mom's after telling Zach to get Rob out of their house. Zach agreed, and after Nat left he woke Rob up and told him to pack his shit and leave. Rob tried to apologize and begged to stay, but Zach was having none of it and kicked him out. Going off the timing, I think he left there and came straight to my house. On Sunday, Zach texted Rob to meet up so that they could speak, and they met up in a pub. Zach has been friends with Rob since they were 11 and has never seen him act like he has been doing, so he wanted to find out what was really going on. He managed to finally get the truth out of Rob. Basically, Rob has been in contact with his dad for a lot longer than he told us. By this point it's over 2 years. His dad is a raging misogynist that believes a woman's place is in the kitchen and bedroom. A man's place is to rule the house and be waited on hand and foot, as well as deciding who can and can't be in their lives. He's been dripping this poison into R's ear and it's really taken a hold of him. Zach told Nat that he just doesn't recognize Rob anymore. Rob wants to start living his life the way his father has told him he should. When Zach pointed out that Rob's dad is 62, living in a shitty one-bedroom flat, not had a real relationship since R's mom left him, has no friends, his family doesn't speak to him, and that he's the type of guy that when he walks into a pub people finish their pants so they can leave and get away from him, Rob was furious. He told Zach that his dad is just misunderstood. Zach responded that people understood his dad and that's why they stayed away from him. He's toxic. This pretty much ended their conversation and Rob left. Zach did find out that Rob does have a flat lined up for January, so that was true, and that he's found Airbnb he can stay until the flat is ready at a minimal cost. Zach and Nat have also decided to go NC with Rob as they don't need that toxicity around them, but especially not around their daughter. A few Redditors had said it sounded like Rob was on drugs, so I asked Nat what she thought, and she doesn't think so but can't be sure. She and Zach think that Rob is just so far under his dad's thumb now that he's completely changed as a person. He believes that everything his dad says is gospel. She did let me know that Rob has a burner IG account that he is using to check on my IG, and I immediately made my account private. He had said something about seeing me waste money on a stupid amount of Christmas presents when I couldn't even help him out with Zach on Sunday. I'd been to a Christmas market on Saturday afternoon and had posted pics on IG. All of this just made my resolve stronger that he will not be getting anywhere near my house again. It also made me realize that I don't have any feelings for him anymore other than frustration at how he's acting and some sadness at how far he's fallen from the man I once knew. I thought that hearing he had another woman in his bed would annoy me, but there was just nothing. I couldn't have cared less. I thanked Nat for the info and we agreed to keep in touch. We won't be as close as we were when I was with Rob, but it feels good to have someone who knows the entire situation and has seen Rob's behavior with his own eyes. There were also some Redditors that told me to ditch the friends that had told me to let him stay with me. Unfortunately, I can't ditch them completely as they're part of the friend group and that would just cause unnecessary drama, but I will be keeping my distance from them and only talking to them when part of the group. I'm currently with my sisters and we are going to watch a Christmas film to get us in the mood to decorate all our houses this weekend, so I will be on and off for the next few hours if anyone has any questions. Thanks for the votes and giving me some perspective. Reddit isn't all bad. For anyone that's still around. December 19th, 2023. Still have people reaching out to see if I'm okay. A few hated me just using initials, so R is Rob. I really hoped that I wouldn't have to update again, but I've just had a call from one of Rob's friends and it looks like he's going to be spending Christmas in prison. Apparently, he went out on Saturday night with his dad and they got into an argument which turned physical. Rob isn't a fighter, however he is bigger and stronger than his dad, and it ended with his dad falling backwards and hitting his head off a wall, knocking him unconscious. The staff in the pub called the police and an ambulance, but Rob left before they got there. Rob's dad had to go to hospital, where he still is. I'm unsure of his exact injuries, but they're not life-threatening. He must also be awake as he is pressing charges against Rob, however they won't keep him in unless absolutely essential at this time of year. Rob was arrested on Sunday morning at the B&B he's been staying at and had to appear in magistrate's court on Monday. Due to him not having a fixed address right now and the fact that his dad is still in hospital, he has been remanded on a Section 18 with intent. Unless he can find a permanent address to go to, then he won't be getting out until his trial at Crown Court. I know his mum is already with his brothers over 250 miles away, so I don't think she will be able to help right now. Finding this out has actually given me a sense of peace right now. I've been trying to ignore it, but the chance of him turning up and spoiling Christmas has been at the back of my mind ever since he turned up at my house. I'm hoping he stays in over Christmas so that I can just relax. OOP on Section 18 in her area. OOP, Section 18 is an assault charge. A Section 18 with intent is the next level up and is classed as intending to and causing grievous bodily harm to someone. I've been told that if found guilty, then it's usually a multiple-year prison sentence. Another mini update. December 23, 2023. I went round to N and Z, hereby known as Nat and Zach, to drop off a present for their daughter, a bottle of Bell's for Zach and a bottle of Prosecco for Nat for Christmas, and had a cup of tea with them whilst they filled me in on what's going on. Rob will be in over Christmas, but will likely get out early January. His lawyer is trying to get the charges reduced from Section 18 with intent to a Section 20. I only found out today that a Section 18 with intent is one step down from attempted murder, and you're looking at double digits in prison if you get found guilty. Section 20 is a lot less severe and is usually a 2-year suspended sentence for first-time offenders, which he is. His lawyer has said that if he pleads guilty to Section 20, then CPS will lower the charges to get this one over and done with ASAP, as the courts are ridiculously backed up in the UK right now and prisons are full. Zach went to the B&B he was staying at and got Rob's stuff, which is now sitting in his garage, as one last favor to Rob, Zach's words. He can't get in touch with me without my consent whilst he is locked away. The prison literally has to ring me and ask if it is okay that I get put on his approved call list, and only then is he allowed to ring me, which won't be happening. I've also spoken to his mom, who has basically washed her hand of him for the time being. She thinks that he needs to learn his lesson, and maybe spending Christmas in a cell will teach him how much he's lost the plot. She has spoken to him and said that he's now saying the right things, but only time will tell if he means them. He is talking about moving to be near his brother to get away from their dad, so maybe he has seen the light. His brother has refused to go onto his call list, so Rob can't contact him, so I don't know how that will work. As for his dad, he is still in hospital with a broken hip and has had to have surgery to fix it. The broken bone and head injury is why the charges are so high right now. I feel like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders, knowing he can't ruin my Christmas. I'm just about to pack everything into the car and go and stay at my mum's until January 2nd, but thought I'd finish the year off letting everyone who's helped me and supported me through this know what's going on. Merry Christmas to everyone that celebrates it, and hope everyone is doing well. Final update, April 13th, 2024. Hi all, sorry it's been a while since my last update, but I wanted everything to be finished before I update it again. Rob spent Christmas on remand in prison. He didn't get out until the second week of January, and that was only because his mum agreed to let him stay with her again. He had his plea hearing the first week of February, where he pleaded guilty to a Section 20 assault. He then had to wait until last week to get his sentencing court date. I didn't know how much actually goes into sentencing. They had to get a victim impact statement, a pre-sentencing report from probation, statements from his mum and brother. His barrister even reached out to me to give a statement saying that we had broken up and I'd asked him to leave the house. He used our breakup as an extenuating circumstance, saying that because of the breakup of our relationship and him losing his home, that had seriously impacted his mental health. The statements from his mom and brother also confirmed that he had lived in an abusive home when he was young, so he claimed he had PTSD because of that. These were all read out at his sentencing. He was going to get 3 years, but the judge knocked time off for pleading guilty and for mitigating circumstances. That left him with a 16-month sentence that was suspended for 18 months. As part of the conditions for his release, he isn't allowed anywhere near his dad, he has to go to counseling for his supposed PTSD, and he isn't allowed to drink alcohol. He even has an ankle monitor that tests his sweat every half an hour for alcohol and will alert probation if he gets a positive result. Luckily for him, his boss has let him go and work at their main location in the city that's half an hour away from here, and probation was happy for him to live there as well. He moved into a flat there this week, so I don't have to worry about running into him. I haven't spoken to him at all, and I don't want to either. He has tried reaching out through a couple of friends, but they've respected my decision and told him to move on with his life. However, I did speak to his mom yesterday and she said that she thinks he's depressed, but so far he's doing okay. She's the one I got all of this information from. It's a strange mix of emotion for me towards him, as I still care on some level, just not enough to keep him in my life. I know I need to keep him away from me, as I can never see him like I did at this time last year. It's crazy to think that it's only been a year since we got engaged. So much has happened. Other than those mixed emotions, I'm doing well. I've been hanging out with my sister and her wife a lot more, as well as catching up with friends. I'm still working at the same place and I don't see that changing anytime soon. For the people asking about my sister, she's doing good. She had a setback last month but she seems to be over that now and has just been approved to have some form of newish stem cell treatment at the UK's biggest eye hospital. Which is fab news. She tried to explain it to me but it involved them taking her blood and putting it into her eye, which grossed me out, so I told her to stop. However, because she's my sister, she then sent me pictures of what they do and Mum had to step in and tell her to stop. No matter how old we get, I don't think we will ever stop trying to annoy each other. So all in all, I think we're all moving on with life. Unless something big happens, then this should be my last post. I really want to thank everyone for their kind words and support. This has restored my faith that there are still good people out there. New update, June 30th, 2024, 2 months later. Hi all, I really hoped I wouldn't have to come back, but I've had several DMs on this account saying that a TikTok video is claiming that I'm back with my ex. I don't have TikTok so I haven't seen it, but that's 100% not true. I haven't seen or spoken to him since my last update. As far as I'm aware, he's still living in the city half an hour away and is doing okay. I'm not really interested, to be honest. Rob's mom has accepted an offer on her house and has moved in with his brother until she can finalize the purchase of her house and find a flat she likes. Everyone else is doing well. My sister is the same and her eye is still healing. She's got some new glasses and says her vision is now nearly back to normal, so that's good. My sister and 7 other family and friends went out to Germany for England's first game, which was a lot of fun. Other than that, I've just been working and finding my new normal. Please don't listen to anything said about this on TikTok, YouTube or anywhere else. I will not be getting back with Rob. That ship has sailed off the edge of a cliff. Relevant comments. Has Rob reached out to OOP? OOP. He was informed that I didn't want to speak to him and wanted to be left alone, and he respected that, thankfully. I just want us both to move on now. I discovered my wife's affair during her writing workshop, hired a P1, gathered evidence, and vanished without a trace before she returned home. Though my friends call me AB, never Andy, I go by Andrew Baker. Every now and then there's a nasty drunk or uneducated man trying to act too familiar and calls me Andy. So Andy, what's your job? They probe. I reply, I made this neat little tool for cops to check drunk individuals from 40 feet away. They have even begun to link them to radars throughout town. That typically shuts them down. That gadget isn't real, though, should you still not know it yet. I obviously have not much tolerance for stupidity. Lie to me, and things go bad. I'm a straightforward guy, not complicated at all. I am content in my career and lead a simple life. I am an engineer employed by a large national corporation with offices scattered over the nation. I have pals, and although I'm not a heavy drinker, I do have a sporadic beer. Though that's my struggle, honestly I tend more toward nachos. I try to keep myself in reasonable form for my age, since, if I let it spiral out of hand, I will gain weight. Every chance I had, I used to go sailing. Now, having a wife and 2 small girls takes up a lot of time. I sold the yacht at last. That was only one of the concessions I have voluntarily given over the years in order to spend quality time with the individuals truly important to me. For 25 years, Karen and I have been contentedly married. Her level of education is high school teacher. Right now our 2 girls are at college. While her younger sister Denise is in Boston University, Claire is a student at Brown University in Rhode Island. I most certainly couldn't afford those pricey universities, but fortunately the girls are committed students with outstanding scholarships. Our house is in North Carolina, more precisely the Research Triangle. It revolves on some outstanding Raleigh institutions and is flanked by first-rate high-tech businesses. One may live and work here quite nicely. Though it would just make me hungry, I could tell you about Carolina BBQ. When the daughters chose institutions up north, I was a little let down, but I know they had to venture beyond their comfort zone, and that is eventually a good thing. Our daughters are wonderful, smart, humorous, lovely young women with strong moral principles. Though I am daily concerned about their safety, I have faith in their judgment. Seeing children mature and start their path towards independence meant that my wife and I could at last have some alone time once more. For some time, I had been excited about this stage. I pictured going home every evening to a loving wife who would concentrate on me, and vice versa, with both girls away at college. I saw us picking back up our relationship and having happy days. It resembled almost exactly being newlyweds once more. We could have dinners out, go to movies and plays, and at last rediscover each other the way I had always wanted. But reality turned out very differently than I had imagined. To be honest, thinking back on that first year of an empty nest, I saw Karen changing. Her hobbies seemed to be changing. Although the change was slow, in time it became increasingly clear. At first I saw these as her means of blossoming now our girls were no longer living with us. But finally I came to see that her priorities and values were undergoing a major change. English teacher Karen specializes in creative writing. She is fairly speaking a frustrated writer as well. She never really had the opportunity to write as she desired being a teacher and young mother. Karen writes during the summer and whenever she could spare an hour or two, but so far not much has come out of it. She liked to compile rejection letters after sending her essays and short tales to literary publications. Her ideal magnificent masterwork was never realized. Though as a writer she has never ventured beyond predictable and perhaps too theatrical tales, I will admit I enjoy reading her. She has a romanticized view of what a writer should be, and covertly I believe she is more drawn to the concept than the actual work. Still, I'm happy too if she is happy. Karen has belonged to several writing clubs most of our marriage. Aiming to help each other's writing, these are meetings of people who come together to offer comments, ideas, and conversations about their work. While some of these organizations seem to be more like clubs of mutual adoration, others seem really useful to me. Her last group, the one she belonged to when everything broke down, contained components of both. They alternated visiting each other's houses, and during their encounters here, I would try to give them privacy. I tried once but stopped since Karen and a few others objected. There are about 10 people in Karen's present writing group, men as well as women. While some of them I could live without, others I enjoy. When you meet them, half of them really are relatively average and the other half really stand out. For example, the lady Reggie is rather passionate in creating biographies and history. She still manages to captivate readers despite doing scholarly-oriented book writing and serious research. I have loved reading all of her works. Betty likes to write fantasy. She tends more toward the talking unicorn type than I would have her as the next J.K. Rowling. She's nice, and her writing seems to be mostly for her own enjoyment. Who can dispute that? Bill takes on the group's know-it-all function. Apart from that, he appears all good. A bit of that goes a long way. Then Frank comes in. The first time I saw him, I felt scared. Ever since, those alarms have kept ringing in my head. It was very evident when I met Frank that I was being introduced to him rather than the other way round. Examining me, he asked, "So Andy, what's your profession?" I looked at my wife. She shook her head and somewhat frowned. I said simply, "I'm an engineer." Frank gave no smile, more of a smirk in reply. Though not precisely out of earshot, I said I had given up trying to interact with their group and preferred to keep rather hidden and quiet. Until they forget, I usually find myself in the next room silently working or on the rear porch with a window open so I could hear their talk. Frank seems to share private jokes and a connection that makes me uneasy when he talks to Karen, early on I found. He occasionally makes her ego stronger and other times seems as though he understands her inner thoughts in a way I value less. He mentions past talks that seem to be only between them, and I get the sense that the rest of the group doesn't recall those times. Although it's only a feeling, I have informed her I find it unpleasant. She dismisses my worries, and I know not to press the topic. She knows my feelings, the rest is up to her. During its sessions, the group performs a set ritual. Their work session ends with some wine and relaxation. It was during this period that I came to see some of them were just acting. It took place in the midst of the spring semester, close to early March, when the subject turned to the way actual writers lived. Oh, you know, all the eminent writers were alcoholics. That's right, they drank in the afternoons and evenings and penned in the mornings. It awakens the mind to fresh concepts and helps one to relax. Their creative ideas then start to flow in the mornings and they start writing. Actually, the really great writers all went through love relationships. That's the real inspiration for them. Frank was saying just that. Thanks for providing, Frank. I'm beginning to get your perspective. Karen's words then really hit me like a gut punch. Indeed, exactly. The real inspiration is found in the intensity and the thrill of the unknown, that is, in keeping it all secret from everyone else. I persuaded myself it was only a joke as some of them laughed and others didn't. Still, I listened in on their chat all through the evening. Maybe we should all have a wild night of passion sometime and then each write the next great American novel. Bill had that. I wasn't sure if he meant it humoristically or not. Not great writing comes from character defects. Features like humanity, empathy, and facing the riddles of the unknown really help to create great stories. I said before that Betty appealed to me. Memorable tales are about conquering obstacles, aiming for excellence in spite of all the odds, and leaving the planet in a better condition than it was in before. Well, perhaps if you conjure the right enchantment, we can avoid all the hassle. Again, that was that jackass Frank. To their shame, some in the group seemed to find that humorous. I had a hunch Reggie didn't either, and I'm not quite sure Betty did. They were debating writer drinking practices and affairs, and I kept listening without offering anything. Then I overheard a fascinating bit of their chat. Is anyone else planning to apply for the Illinois Writer Workshop this summer? Frank was now speaking once more. Oh, I turned in my application already. Keeping my fingers crossed will help them to accept me. 6 weeks of just writing and talking with other authors could truly change things for me. This was Karen. I had never heard of her before. Frank caught it up straight immediately. I am sure they will welcome you. Your work has improved really dramatically this past year. I think you will get admitted. I've also applied. I'm not as sure I'll be in though. My own feeling of internal radar for stupidity was off target. Frank, really, when did you start to get so modest? Though at this point I still loved and trusted my wife, I didn't like what I was hearing. Trust is basic when you have been married for the length of time we have. You ask not, is she up to no good? Not even cross your head the idea. Your mate is your other half. Marriage is a partnership. She has proved her dedication year after year. All you really want is for her to discover the success and happiness she so deserves, or at least that is what you think. Later on though, everything falls apart when you find your confidence has been betrayed. Update 1. I let myself ignore the overheard exchange from that evening over time. As I said, I trusted my wife entirely. Some younger males might not understand it, but trust becomes a way of life rather than only a decision after being married for more than 20 years. Late April found me finishing some outside gardening when I decided to call it a day and head indoors. Reaching for the kitchen door, I discovered my wife on the phone exclaiming, I can't wait, 6 whole weeks without any responsibilities, no commitments, and no one waiting for me to get back. At the last bit I started to perk. I stopped in front of her and listened. Absolutely, those 6 weeks will be the most self-indulgent of my life. I owe it to myself, you too owe it to yourself. Not one of these appealed to me. I walked through the kitchen opening the door. Karen appeared shocked. Well, I have to sprint. AB is here and I have to start cooking dinner. She grabbed fast. I said, who was that on the phone? Oh, just Regina. We were discussing the shortly closing of schools. Like heck it was, I said. I wanted to probe her about some of her remarks, particularly one about no one waiting for me to come home, but I realized that tonight the truth might be in scarce supply. Though I tried to hide it for the moment, my attitude worsened. Dinner later that evening, the other shoe dropped. AB, the amazing news I got today will not surprise you. Recall that Illinois Writer Workshop for which you applied? Come on, you hardly pay attention to me. To be honest, I had heard about the workshop before. But that was only because I had overheard her talking about it over a month ago. I don't remember you stressing it. Sure, I did. I applied for a 6-week workshop for authors. At the University of Illinois, it falls mid-June through late July. Their lecturers give lectures. They also bring in eminent authors for seminars and debate forums. We then get rather busy writing. I was accepted and this is an amazing chance. That sounds excellent, honey. We could certainly handle it financially. Perhaps I might join you and take a little time off from work. I would really enjoy listening to those authors speak. Her response appeared odd. Well, we can think about it. I won't have much free time to spend with you over the very demanding 6 weeks. My gut was tingling once more. Well, you know I'm not exacting. I could be the group's coffee guy. She gave a really tense smile. That may be lovely, darling. Let us monitor things. Such deflections have come from both sides. I knew what they meant. She was making sure I wouldn't wind up traveling to Illinois with her. I get the sense you would rather I didn't go with you. Oh no, it is not like that. I merely worry you might find it boring. You're into computers and circuits, and this is basically writers discussing major concepts. I kept that to myself. Back off, I thought. When I was being excluded, I knew. I said, ending the discussion, I'm sure you'll excel. After Karen retired to bed later that evening, I checked our phone records online. AITA provides that capability. All incoming and outgoing calls as well as text messaging are logged. When I looked over the phone log, the call I had cut off wasn't with Reggie. Or if it was, Frank's phone started it. When you find your wife lying and learning she has plans to exclude you, it's amazing how quickly trust can fall apart after a quarter century of marriage. Weeks went by, and she appeared fixated on the workshop's talks. She rejected the idea every time I tried several times to talk about maybe visiting at some time or going with her. She next moved from rationalizing to manipulating. AB, I have some interesting news. Late June saw me get you and Jake 2 passes to a fishing camp in northern Canada. You can take Jake, and both of you will love fishing for those large brown fish you constantly mention. Although it was very costly, I wanted to show thanks for your understanding of the writer's workshop. And I felt a little bad since you wouldn't be having fun, hence I want you to go and have a fantastic time. We may then discuss our experiences when I get back. Something didn't seem right. Thanks, sweetheart, that shows consideration of you. To be honest, I would enjoy your company more. AB, we have seen this. Simply said, it makes no sense. I will be working all through. I would feel guilty ignoring you in such a manner. I looked at her face and eyes momentarily, trying to make sense of it. Was it contempt? Thanks, honey. Canada seems entertaining. My voice was devoid of energy. I was mentally organizing my choices. A surprise trip to Illinois took the front stage. Well, you could at least say it while grinning. Those tickets cost a lot of money, so you should be glad. Sure, sounds fantastic. To tinker for the evening, I descended to the basement. Our ancient house had one of those floor grates in the corridor. Originally, the first floor was heated by it, allowing warm air to pass from the furnace room. I first made a point not to step on it inadvertently, but with time I grew used to it and forgot about its existence. There is also the phone in the hall. I was quietly working in the basement, thinking about what to do when I heard Karen on a call. Yes, I handed him the passes. He remains unsure. I keep telling him he won't love it. I'm not sure exactly. No, I cannot merely advise him against showing up. I want it too, but I also want to stay married later on. I simply need him to allow me some time to enjoy myself over a few weeks. I have earned it, I am due. I do want those weeks with you as well. All fine, let us wait a while. I believe he will show up. All right, darling, I miss you too. For me tonight, write something outstanding. She cut off the call with that. I got a lump in my throat. I'm not naive, I hear cheating and know it's not good. Karen either was thinking about or in an affair. Anything less, and she would still have a lot of work to do explaining. It took me 20 minutes to collect my ideas, but I decided that for now I had to start acting like the kind of liar I've always hated. At least for the moment I had to hide my goals until I had a strategy. In a very loving voice I said, Karen, I'm heading over to see Jake and give him the good news. As I phoned upstairs. Oh, that's fantastic, darling. Enjoy, she said. And I was out the basement door exactly like that. I required distance. Seeing Jake was only a pretext. Thinking about it, I knew I needed someone to confide in. And Jake had been my closest buddy from early life. You're kidding me, Jake responded, not dodging around the issue. No way, I won't buy it. She would never turn on you, AB. Well, she's certainly working hard to keep me away from that workshop, and she's calling someone baby, and it's definitely not me. We merely sat there, silent. Most men want from a friend simply sitting with them and sharing the suffering. You have to talk to her about this, AB. Assuming the worst without knowledge of the truth will not help you through the next few months. And what is she likely to say? When I review the phone records tonight, how much would you want to wager that Frank was not the one she spoke with? Frank she called baby, and Frank she's plotting with wasn't Frank. I am not laying that bet. What then is your intended course of action? I'm going to grab a seat and have a frank conversation. After 25 years of marriage, that's what you do. I'll tell her I love her. Let her know I'm offended she doesn't want me to travel with her, and I'll ask her straightforwardly what she's up to, that she doesn't want me there. Do you suppose she would tell you the truth? Nope, but I'll tell her the truth. Even if some of it isn't what she wants to hear. She'll know how much I love her. She will understand that cheating on me will destroy our relationship. She will then most likely try to persuade me that I should simply go fishing since I am seeing things. I stopped just for a moment. By the way, 1 ticket is for you. I have 2 for a fishing camp in northern Canada in late June. Nice, Jake said, catching himself. I mean, friend, here I am to help you. I laughed a little bit. I have always known exactly where his allegiance resides. Before I left for home, we spoke, exchanged ideas, and drank a few beers for 3 hours. I opened up about practically everything. After dinner, asking Karen to come sit with me in the living room. I pushed back a few things. Sweetheart, I have some quite major worries. About the writer's workshop, I don't think you have been quite open with me. You mentioned it to me only once you had already scheduled a trip, even though I overheard you talking about it with your writer group back in March. I have to admit, I didn't find it funny when you mentioned how common affairs are among brilliant authors. Frank and you have been talking about your vacation, but when I ask, you lie and say it's someone else. You know how I feel about that guy. Then, When you told me you were accepted, you seemed deliberately aloof and discouraged me from participating. Though I am not here, I wanted to partake in this fascinating trip with you. Rather than thinking about it, you set plans for me to be somewhere else without even talking to me. Just committing on my behalf. You seem to be attempting to make sure I won't be around when you're in Illinois. You haven't been quite honest with me, hence I'm beginning to wonder if you have been entirely loyal. AB, I would never be dishonest with you and I have never treated you that way. What has drawn you in? Being your husband, all I want is for you to have fun. That you could believe something like that about me truly hurts. I have no control over my emotions or what sets things off. You know, I love you. Since our first meeting, I have loved you. Nevertheless, I cannot just ignore the concept of treachery. Are you hoping for that, Karen? Is this writer's workshop your haven from our marriage? Update 2. Our dialogue came to an end with that. Not more loving or sympathetic conversation. She started screaming and spent the remainder of the evening either shouting or silently. And for the next week, it was silent. She was trying to get me to turn back down by applying the silence treatment, thereby punishing me. It did not work though. Actually, it reinforced my beliefs solely. But I knew I wasn't moving in this direction and finally I let her think she had achieved success. Not much I could do to stop her from cheating if she intended to do so. The phone call I listened in on even hinted she might have done it already. I finally thanked her for the vacation to Canada, but my attitude stayed dark until the trip was finished. She changed her attitude fast and behaved like a devoted wife to support the behavior she wanted from me once she had what she wanted. She seemed to flick a switch, which just made me more suspicious. When I am the recipient of manipulation, I know it is happening. I asked a colleague who he consulted when he suspected his wife of cheating. The Illinois Writers' Workshop was just 500 meters away and I knew none there. I took his advice and the person he suggested was Illinois-based. I contacted them asking for help. The fact that the session occurred on a state university campus made its location favorable. Although they couldn't take part in the program, the PI's agents could roam the campus and monitor the rooms as needed. The participants would eat in the university cafeterias, go to nearby clubs, and share a big dorm with other students. This gave room for covert monitoring. With modern tools, some of these kids would actually be working for me. Our daughters decided to stay in their colleges for the summer to work in research labs under their professors as the school year was drawing to a conclusion. We were still empty nesters then. I deliberately tried to invite her to dinners made at home and show her around. She appeared to be enjoying everything, hence I began to think I was improving. But every time I told her I loved her, I felt her dismissive I know attitude. The fragments of the puzzle came together gradually. She had merely taken me for granted, not stopped loving me. I knew her safety net was consistent and familiar. She knew she could go away, find thrills, break off our marriage, and I would be waiting when she got back. This insight brought my ideas into line. I knew I couldn't leave things unanswered the day she left. Her shuttle for the airport came as we stood close to the door. I begged and said, "Please don't do anything that could ruin us," tightly gripping her. She flashed me an annoyed glance in answer and retorted, "I'm tired of you not trusting me. We will have a major discussion about this when I get back." She snatched her luggage, kissed me quickly on the cheek and hurried for the shuttle. She left without ever looking back at me. I sensed then that my marriage was about to end. After 25 years and our 2 grown kids, it seemed our relationship was going away with little notice. The private investigator did his work really well. He said they were in an unfamiliar area so they didn't bother covering their acts. Karen has to have taken off her wedding bands on the plane since they vanished off her finger when she arrived at the studio. She claimed freely to be newly divorced, and Frank and my wife started to be inseparable right away. They were together all the time, kissing, holding hands, and behaving as passionate high school students would have. My PI cleverly set a tiny video camera in their dorm hallway. Karen and Frank only used one of their designated rooms, although each had one. Sometimes her chamber, sometimes his, but always they stayed late together. Although I knew what was happening in those shared dorm rooms, my PI and his crew went to considerable measures to verify my suspicions. Frank and my wife left early one evening before it was dark. 2 agents, looking like normal college students, sat against the corridor wall and surreptitiously slipped a tiny fisheye camera under the door. Frank was seen in action for 20 minutes using this gadget. The video quality was shockingly clear, and he clearly hadn't used protection when he finished. That for me was the last straw. I was clearly done with this marriage. Anything else the team found served only as more proof to support my position. Regular updates from my private investigator kept me informed, but after that first week her future was obvious and my decision was taken. Beginning the early days of her workshop, I spent time implementing my plan. I wanted to be virtually invisible, almost ghostly. I would have vanished and there would be no turning back. No falsehoods, no ultimatums, no protracted negotiations, explanations, justifications, or attempts at reconciliation when she got back. The sole outcome would be divorce. My marriage was about to fall apart. Though it does not fade fast, what is love without trust? An unfaithful wife cannot define a future. Some could contend that my answer was weak. They could advise she deserves horrible humiliation, physical punishment, and total poverty. Ultimately, though, the law would forbid me from pursuing any of that, and I had no intention of ruining the rest of my life by seeking such cruel revenge on my adulterous wife and her lover. Eliminating the one thing she always depended on, the consistent presence that comforted, encouraged, uplifted and inspired her, would be my payback. I was walking away from myself. Frank lacked suitability for a catch. Long-term, he was unable to meet her needs. Where would a 50-year-old divorced mother find emotional stability and love? I not give a damn. She no longer would be of interest to me. My private investigator would bring me more images, recordings, and proof of treachery by the person who promised me allegiance above all else every few days. The pictures and videos in the reports were very upsetting to view. The reports themselves were challenging to read. Especially when they covered me, the audio recordings were the toughest to handle. He is always emailing me about the fish he is catching and how incredible it is up there. Nearly every day he thanks me. She laughs. Frank joined in the laughing. He's clueless. You escape from his irritation by keeping him in the dark and treating him like a mushroom. He could as well have fun right now. I'll face that geek about his charges when I get back. How dare he continually charge me of cheating? But you're momentarily straying from our marriage, correct, beautiful? Alternatively, is another woman sleeping next night on my bed? She laughed at that, really. Well, I won't put up with that even if he may be onto something. Damn it, I'm a writer. His circuits and computer lingo are holding me back with their millimeters and micro thingamajigs. About huge ideas, what does he know? Update 3. As long as my existence stayed linked to hers, none of the several ways I considered for retribution would really satisfy me. One decision remained, and I started the process of separating from her. I explained everything honestly to my supervisor. Having gone through something like this personally not so long ago, he could appreciate it. He set up a transfer for me to show up at Portland, Maine, our corporate office. I thought the concept was interesting. I knew the folks there were professional, competent, and I liked their company. I found attractions in the town and the state as well. To get half of the furniture and all of my personal stuff up north, I booked movers. I checked that my automobile was in good condition for the trip, then spoke with a lawyer to start the divorce process. Regarding money problems, Karen had a retirement account and her own insurance. I made my daughters the beneficiaries and deleted her name from every one of my possessions. For no alimony, I signed a quitclaim deed turning the house over to her. She would keep her automobile but have to deal with her own insurance. Keeping my plans understated, I intended to handle credit cards and bank accounts closer to the finish. From that point ahead, I concentrated on strengthening my will. I meant to call her to show my love and to find out how the workshop was going. Hearing her lies would help me to get more convinced that my behavior was justified. She didn't let down anyone. She reacted with fervor, said her love, and went out to dinner in less than 2 minutes. Later on, my private investigator told me Frank was right next to her, mocking gestures and knowing glances, which just confirmed my choice. She clearly saw the matter as a joke, which validated my direction in life. Later on, I decided to text her instead of calling since I wasn't sure I could control my feelings over the phone. Though in reality I sent Jake and his wife on such vacations, I would tell her about great fishing excursions. They enjoyed themselves thoroughly. Regarding his marriage, Jake made a smart decision. They promised to see me and I did pay them a farewell visit before I left. Her 6-week workshop was ending, and I finished my last assignments. I put a for sale sign from a buddy who works as a real estate agent in the front yard. She was ignorant of that aspect, but I couldn't really sell the house without her permission, especially since I had already transferred ownership to her. Her first sight upon returning home would be the sign. To help the house seem less like a house, I changed the locks. I created a copy of the PI's report and chose specific pictures from her trip, including graphic stills from the video shot taken under Frank's door. To let her know she had been found out, I left all of this on the dining room table. The movers had already relocated most of my stuff. They would keep it until I needed it. I packed just 2 pieces of luggage, a briefcase, a laptop, and a guitar. I absolutely had to have my guitar. Something so valuable could not be trusted to anybody else. Frank could be engaged with my wife, but I loved my guitar very much. Knowing she wouldn't be back until late that evening, my first thought was to leave the next morning. I would be long gone when she showed up. But the evening before I changed my mind. She could only wait and worry. I wanted her to feel the suffering right away. Along with the words divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you, I emailed her 3 well-selected pictures of her with Frank. I chose one picture when they were almost close on the dance floor, obviously revealing she wasn't sporting her engagement and wedding rings. The second picture caught them holding hands as they entered his dorm room. The third was a crisp face-clear screenshot from the dorm room footage. She would see these pictures, and I hoped it would ruin her last beautiful night with Frank as they furiously looked for cameras that had already been taken down. Then I turned off my phone. Leaving the house our family had lived in for many years was a mix of grief, uncertainty, and newly acquired independence. All at once it seemed like the most difficult, uncertain, and freeing event of my life. My wife basically disappeared from my life. Though I hadn't personally caused it, it seemed as though she had died, not knowing the when or the why. The woman looking like my wife was someone I knew nothing about and I wanted no contact with. I was starting over and had no idea where I might be headed. Among the great loss, there was an unusual sense of emancipation. If only momentarily, the weight of dishonesty, treachery, and belittlement was offloaded from my shoulders. The sole expense was half of my life now unreachable. Late, but my mind was racing, so I drove almost 100 miles down the peaceful highway lost in contemplation till I came to a hotel for the evening. I was hoping for a real local breakfast restaurant, not for a chain motel. I searched for something real. I eventually found it and enjoyed what might be my final dish of grits for some time. My perspective changed and I started to rethink my path to Maine as I ate those grits. This signaled the beginning of my new life, and I had a long journey ahead. I had a 2-week window before employment began, so even if I could speed up my trip to Maine, fleeing my troubles, why accelerate? I needed time to gather my ideas, process her treachery and let the past go. I decided to go gradually. Enjoying the landscape on my northward drive and interacting with every state and its people as I passed through. My old life would give way to my new one this week. To be ready for a fresh start and clear myself of the ugly and blunders of my past, I meant to nurture my senses, including my taste buds. Wandering about Williamsburg among the summer throngs, the rest of the day was lost. I investigated the abilities of talented craftsmen and artists. I found somewhere to stay even though I had no reservation. My thoughts returned to my failing marriage only after a small dinner and settling in for the evening. She was probably going home about that time. Seeing the for sale sign on the front yard and knowing her keys wouldn't open the door, I wondered how she would respond. I traveled north along the winding roads toward Annapolis, Maryland's capital, the following day. Along Virginia's ancestral rivers, the York, Rappahannock and Potomac, which go into the Chesapeake Bay, I passed through little villages and old estates. Ahead, there was one road stretch headed toward my destiny. I would follow that meandering road, which led me from betrayal to a new chapter in my life. Update 4. At last turned on my cell phone, I sat in my hotel room in downtown Annapolis. It was, predictably, full with many missed calls, emails, and text messages. A few came from friends, most of them came from Karen. Despite it being difficult, I read and listened to every one of them. That was a step that was absolutely vital. Indeed, Karen was trying to persuade me that things were not as they seemed at first. She sent those texts from Illinois before going back home, then saw the remainder of the pictures and perused the PI's report. My pals were letting me know, meanwhile, that Karen was trying to find me by contacting everyone. She was looking in all the wrong places, little knowing it. Although Jake and his wife knew, I decided to deliberately keep the rest in the dark. Once I had been established, I would let them know. I knew immediately that I could not spend eternity ghostly. 2 calls from my girls started to worry me. Karen had gotten in touch with them trying to track me. As I wanted to do it in person, I had deliberately not notified them about my choice to leave their mother. I gently explained the matter to my daughters, though, since I cannot let them worry. Their mother could do such a thing, which infuriated them and made it difficult for them to believe. For this reason, I emailed them the identical images I had shown Karen the evening I left home together with the PI's report. They promised then not to tell their mother about my activities. One more missed call. My attorney told me Karen had been formally served with divorce papers. She knew now that I intended business. Frank's wife had also got a whole set of pictures, films, and audio recordings from his 6-week program. For Frank, that was a karma dosage. Driving over northern Maryland on the 3rd day of my trip, I eventually arrived at New Jersey. Well, not exactly with much enthusiasm. I entered New Jersey but stopped just before I arrived in Connecticut. Once in Connecticut, I spent several hours investigating some coastal historic towns. Though I had no particular objective, the architecture was so different from what I was accustomed to in North Carolina that I felt a strong sensation of being in a new place, both physically and emotionally. And avoided telling the authorities, but I spent an hour in Groton looking for as many submarines as I could. Those black fish are quite stealthful. Looking along the coast, I was reminded that those nuclear submarines cut a hole in the hull to refuel the reactor and subsequently weld the hull back together. Was that another way to describe my circumstances? Could the first step in rejuvenating my life be Karen's treachery, which ripped a hole in my heart? Once I started down a new path, could I heal myself? The next day when I got up, I knew it would be the toughest day thus far. Following a filling breakfast of eggs, bacon, bread and a robust cup of black coffee, I prepared myself for a challenging chat with my eldest daughter, Claire, at Brown. The drive there took little time, and I was at her dorm about late morning. We agreed to postpone our talk a little so she could act happy for an hour or two. She showed me around the university, then brought me to the cafeteria, where she met her friends. These were exactly the kind of young men and women I had hoped she would surround herself with, friendly, attentive, and apparently supportive. I pulled Claire's roommate aside on our way out and told her Claire had a difficult day. She was supposed to watch my daughter. "Of sure, Mr. Baker," she said. "She shared it with us last night. Here among us are all her supporters." Yes, my daughter had made sensible friend choices. Claire and I stayed in her dorm room talking for hours. I showed her pictures and played audio recordings I never would have imagined to expose to one of my kids. Her feelings swung from grief to rage. "Mom would do that is beyond unbelievable. Is she the same person who raised us at all? She has become what kind of nasty person?" Though I could relate to her, at that moment I had to step in. "Claire is your mother whatever she does. And keep in mind that I, not you, she has betrayed." "Sorry, Dad, but she broke my soul family. I am definitely affected by this." I couldn't contradict that. We kept talking all afternoon, and I showed her my ideas. I urged her to get her friends together, and we had dinner at the greatest restaurant in town, or at least the one within my means. Everyone seems to have delighted in a departure from the standard dining hall cuisine. I related tales of my own college eating experiences, and I believe it helped them to see their own circumstances in a fresh light. That night I remained at a nearby hotel. The next morning I had breakfast with Claire, hugged her tearfully, and then traveled north to repeat the procedure. Claire has to have told Denise, as her response was far more under control than that of her older sister. Though less astonished, there remained dissatisfaction and resentment. She asked to view the supporting materials. I showed her. Her mother called coincidentally as we were chatting, and I sent her the universal sign for, "No, I'm not here." I shook my head, waved wildly, and copied a throat-cutting action. She knew, Denise was always the family's more level-headed member. She then accomplished something I had never seen before. She said, "Dad phoned yesterday night, did he not? Is it true you have evolved into a lady who lies about cheating on her husband and engages in multiple partner involvement?" I stunned myself. Though at the same time I couldn't dispute the truth in her remarks, I wanted to chastise her for talking to her mother like that. "You heard Mom. You stayed 6 weeks helping someone else while Dad was alone at home. Mom, was it well worth it? Was it worth going without your spouse?" Really, my daughter uses words rather brilliantly. Note to self, stay off her negative side. Not much more ground to cover. Denise told me that although her mother was primarily in tears and trying to provide apologies, my daughter was not buying any of it. Not far from the university, I later brought Denise and her companions to a Thai restaurant named the Elephant Walk. Like her sister, Denise had selected her friends deliberately, and dinner was a nice gathering. One of her friends stated, "Mr. Baker, Denise told us about what you're going through on our way back to campus. Last night, she was rather agitated. We helped her. Perhaps you could come back here and we will treat you to the cafeteria." That made the group giggle. I mean, really, maybe we can find a better place than that. This set off more chuckles, and we laughed all the way back to her dorm. After finding a place to rest for the evening, I had breakfast with my daughter in the morning, and on the 7th day of my trip I kept on going northward. I left Boston and arrived barely 2 hours south of Portland. My priorities now were my girls rather than my soon-to-be ex-wife. I couldn't be prouder of them. They were becoming strong, moral young women. I came to see they would negotiate the approaching divorce more skillfully than I had imagined. Leaving these two incredible jewels behind with no idea of when I will see them again presented a struggle on this day. As it happens, my concerns were unfounded. Not ready to face the realities of beginning my new life just yet, so when I arrived at Portsmouth, New Hampshire, I turned west and headed for the Presidential Range and the White Mountains. I arrived in the White Mountains and ascended Mount Washington via the Cog Railway. Feeling the chilly Arctic winds that seemed out of place in the early days of August, I finally sensed a rebirth inside myself as I stood there gazing across the breadth to the lesser peaks of the White Mountains and surveyed the lush pine trees below. Though alone, at least I was tall. I had changed, shedding the obligations and regrets of my previous existence. I was then ready to welcome the fresh chapter and all its possibilities. Standing on higher ground, I was ready to start a different trip. Everything I could have wanted was ahead. I placed a real maple syrup-topped pancake order the next morning. Right now I was in maple syrup country. Years to come would find me in the same surroundings. Restless and ready, I got back into my car and headed for Portland. Arriving in the middle of the afternoon, I chose to follow up with my new manager to let them know I'd arrived. About half of the office personnel knew me already, so I was greeted warmly. It was comforting. Those were the first happy, straightforward faces I had seen in a week. Henry, my new manager, got the staff assembled for introductions. I took a brief tour of the company, but not before everyone decided where we would all eat dinner. I thought it would be a downtown restaurant, but to my astonishment we found ourselves grilling steaks in Henry's place with all the accompaniments. Though I should have savored lobster in Maine, there was no hurry for it. This was more about getting back into society and savoring some really delicious steaks and quite exceptional local beer. They asked about my story. What was a guy from the South doing uprooting his life and moving to Maine at this point? I thereafter told my story. I left off the graphic elements but gave enough for them to grasp. I might get a bit short-tempered in the next few weeks, I said at closing. Though I have a lot to process, it is not my usual attitude. If I act out, perhaps you would call me out and advise me to chill off. Now and then I could use some mild pushback. Every man put his arm around my shoulder. Every woman present unexpectedly gave me a peck on the cheek. All they said, "AB," was, "We're here for you." All they needed to say. Later that evening, I turned on my cell phone once more after getting inside my hotel room. One of each of my daughters had sent encouraging notes. I had gotten perhaps 8 or 10 extra texts from the young men and women who loved the dinner and wanted me to know they would be there for my girls, so they must have shared my number with their friends. Those young people are really amazing. Many friends kept reaching out, so I decided to get in touch with all of them and explain the circumstances so they can stop worrying. I kept my whereabouts secret. That would come later. I just explained why I had left. Though at first they were reluctant to believe it, I sent them the same 3 pictures I had sent Karen and told them I had even more damning evidence should they require more proof. I considered it, but really I couldn't think of one way to keep her from making her own decisions. Let the truth out in due course. I had tried and it had not worked. Every one of them sent me loving notes and encouragement. I told them I would keep in touch. My ideas of becoming a ghost were clearly wishful thinking. Too many people cared about me, and that is undoubtedly a good thing. I listened to the missed calls while reading over Karen's last text messages. She came clean eventually and admitted, although her confession was laced with odd outbursts of wrath. She found me one way or another responsible for her behavior and for all that had happened. That is simply ludicrous. I texted her saying I would call her about noon the next day. It has to happen sooner or later. Let's say the talk was not at all fulfilling. She moved from denial to remorse to blame. She apologized. Over her, Frank had great influence. Her suffocating me was a result. I worked too much, hence I was at fault. She even dared to assert that between them, they were merely playing about. Nothing major happened. When she tried to persuade me she was merely looking for her creative inspiration, I almost started laughing. She even accused me of turning our girls against her, as if her own behavior hadn't achieved that without my help. When she finally stopped talking, I laid it out for her quite simply. She had plotted with Frank to turn on me, fought my attempts to mend our relationship, carried out the betrayal, and now she was dealing with fallout. The whys lost importance to me now. She was still begging her case and sobbing when I hung up. I was finished with her. Not turning back, I knew too much. Conveniently near the office, I found a basic but pleasant 2-bedroom apartment in an older building. Originally considering it as a temporary situation, I believed I could utilize the walking exercise but soon changed my viewpoint. Living simply in town, avoiding the added chores that come with owning a house, and having a little coastal cottage for weekends sounded like a wonderful idea. Then I considered why I should stop at a cottage. My seaside escape may be a yacht I purchase, kept parked in the harbor. Early October arrived by the time I worked through all of this. Though I had intended to live alone, it has not turned out that way. Actually, I spend more time with my daughters right now than I did in Raleigh. Every month they arrange a weekend trip, usually accompanied by friends. My apartment is alive during those 36 hours, and I generally treat them to dinner. Though I miss them right away, I do yearn for the silence once they are gone. A handful of my friends have visited and the others intend to visit when the weather is better. Surprisingly, though I live alone, I am not lonely. Along with all my travels, I have acquired new pals at work. The sailing community is vibrant and welcoming. I have met interesting women. I will, however, keep polite and well-mannered until the divorce is official. Karen still gets in touch with me even if the divorce will be formal soon. She would rather minimize the circumstances and never really stones. She says simply, "Everyone does it, it has no significance at all." It does though. The intimacy has weight, hence the dishonesty and manipulation are much more important. Though people evolve and I no longer see the use in conveying this to her. To be honest, my life is not quite apart from hers. Complete dissociation is not likely given 2 daughters and numerous mutual connections. Still, I no longer live with the everyday suffering of rejection and betrayal 600 miles separating us. Up until I was no longer living in hers, she was the focal point of my life. I am now building my own future and walking my own road. A number of favorable results came from the circumstance. To start with, I actually adore living up here. Though it's a bit of a shock, I'm experiencing my first Maine winter. If others can do it, so can I. Early darkness in this area actually makes indoor events seem cozier and more brilliant. I'm excited about spring when I can work on splicing lines and applying varnish because I started looking for a boat and came upon a spot with moorings not too far from town. The people are real, the microbreweries are excellent, and the neighborhood restaurants are decent. There is a range of music, dances to learn, like contra dancing, and I am still finding surprises. After all, I think life will go out for me. Is my heart at last healed? Not yet, but I have hope for the better life that is ahead since time has a way of curing hurts. Oh, and as a side note, Frank's wife appears to be as traditional as I am. She divorced him and kicked him out the house. Even worse is what is involved here. Frank and Karen are still unpublished. Am I the asshole for disappearing after my wife demanded half of everything in divorce after cheating with her ex? I had felt that the day couldn't get any worse, but I was mistaken. The entire week at work had been terrible, and to top it all off, my employer, the company president, summoned me to his office to chastise me for a mistake done by someone else. When I arrived home, I noticed that my sister-in-law's car had blocked my driveway, preventing me from parking in front of my house. The neighbor's adolescent son and his pals had clogged the street with parked automobiles, forcing me to park 3 doors away. As I entered the house, I wondered why I was even bothering. My connection with my wife's sister, Susan, has been difficult since we first met. I couldn't understand why, but she seemed to have an instinctive hate for me. Furthermore, I had little hope for an intimate evening with my wife Janice, because we hadn't been intimate in nearly a month, despite my best attempts. When I arrived at my driveway, I noticed an empty garbage can by the curb and hauled it around the side of the house through the side gate to place it near to the back door. As I entered the kitchen, I could hear music and the chatter of my wife and her sister in the living room. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and took a sip before stepping into the living room. However, a sentence I overheard at the entrance stopped me in my tracks. God, he fucked me 3 times today. It was not from my sister-in-law, but from my dear wife. Ever since Brandon came back last month, I just can't get enough of him. I told my wife. I recognized Brandon as my wife's ex-boyfriend, who had abandoned her and moved away. Curious, my wife's sister inquired. So what are you going to do now? Janice responded, Brandon wants me to move in with him, so I will hire a lawyer and file for divorce. This is a communal property state, thus I will get half of everything. I'd heard more than enough. Numbly, I walked to the rear door and retraced my steps to my car. Opening the door, I slumped into the driver's seat, comprehending why I'd been denied intimacy. My wife was sharing it with someone else, but now she wants half of everything. The worst aspect was that the state was likely to give it to her. Janice and I got married 3 years ago. She had left her job immediately after our vows, and when she was at home, she never moved. I hired a maid 3 times a week to clean the house and do the laundry, and she also cooked dinner. The rest of the time, I cooked or she got takeout. I know what you're thinking, but love puts blinders on me. She kept me satisfied by offering good sex till about a month ago. My mother died when I was 13, a heartbreaking loss for both my father and me. Dad did his utmost to raise me properly, and we grew quite close. Losing Dad to a drunk driver when I was 23 was a devastating blow, especially since I had just met Janice the previous year. Inheriting over $2.5 million from Dad, I properly invested the money under the supervision of a competent broker. Despite Janice's attempts to squander every penny I made, I had an additional 100,000 in savings. I had never touched the bequest, allowing it to grow despite the current economic climate. I had enough to live comfortably and did not need to waste it. My love for Janice prompted us to overlook a prenuptial agreement, which is a common error made by couples who believe their marriage will endure forever. This error meant she could possibly collect about $1.5 million from me for the privilege of spreading her legs. The state was all too eager to encourage this sanctioned kind of exploitation. She had discussed hiring a lawyer, indicating that she was not yet ready to serve me. I knew I had time to act. I sat in my car, devising a strategy, keeping an eye on the rearview mirror until I noticed my sister-in-law's car pull out and drive away. I started the car, did a U-turn, and walked back to my driveway. When I entered the house, Janice was nowhere to be found, so I went to the kitchen for another drink. After popping the lid and taking a long sip, I considered my next steps. "Oh, there you are, honey," Janice said as she entered the kitchen. "I didn't hear you come in." "Hello, sweetie, I have just gotten in." "Been a long day," I said with a warm smile, determined to play the part as convincingly as she did. "I didn't have time to order anything for dinner," she admitted with a small pout. Although I wanted to respond, "That's because you spent the day with your boyfriend, discussing all the details with your sister," I said. "That's fine, dear. I'll just reheat some leftovers from last night." She gave me a nice grin, kissed my cheek and said she was going to take a hot bath. I smiled and nodded, thinking, yeah, gotta wash all that away. When she went, I grabbed a plate of fried rice and ate it cold while drinking another 2 beers. After tossing the empty container, I returned to the den and sat on the chair, channel surfing. I decided on an old movie. Janice arrived about a half hour later and sat on the couch until the film concluded. Standing up, she stated she was sleepy and was going to bed. Yeah, tired of being unfaithful, I thought to myself. I informed her that I would watch the news and join her later. I hadn't paid much attention to the film. My mind was preoccupied with planning my next move. Knowing I couldn't do anything until Monday, I got through the following 3 days, working in the yard on Saturday and playing golf with friends on Sunday. On Monday, I contacted the broker who was handling my inheritance portfolio and requested that everything be liquidated. Being in senior management enabled me to take out my 401k quickly, penalty be darned. By Thursday, I was prepared to make my move. Returning home to my apparently loving wife, I informed her of an emergency crisis, explaining that I would be away for a week on corporate business. I packed only 2 suitcases. When we moved into this house, I kept everything significant to me. None of it suited her taste, therefore there was nothing else I wanted. The furnishings were her pick and I honestly couldn't care less about them. The bright lining in this situation was that we were renting the house, so I had no financial stake in it. After selling my condo, we were looking for the ideal house to buy. When I say right, I refer to her standards. So far, none of the houses we've looked at appeared to suit her criteria. On Friday morning, I kissed my wife on the cheek one final time before carrying my baggage out. I loaded them into my Lexus and drove away without looking back. My first trip was at an old friend's house, Jake, whom I trusted entirely. He was surprised when I suggested switching titles for his older but rebuilt 4-wheel drive vehicle. An hour after confiding in him about my condition, I was on my way west. I doubted anyone would associate me with this vehicle, and Jake promised to keep the automobile I traded him hidden in the garage for a while. For the next 4 days, I paid for everything with cash. I canceled all of our credit cards to avoid leaving a paper trail. My broker had ensured that the majority of my money was safely deposited in an offshore account. I have a system in place with him to handle fund transfers as needed. I had enough money hidden in the SUV to last a while. The nights alone in motels were the most difficult. For the preceding week, I had been too preoccupied with carrying out my plan to think about what had occurred to me personally. I had adored Janice. I would not have married her otherwise. I ran through several what-if situations in my head, but I eventually realized that there wasn't much I could have done differently. Even if I knew her ex-boyfriend had returned, I doubt I could have kept them away. I came to 2 conclusions. She had probably never truly loved me, and it was my own responsibility for marrying her. On my 5th day away from home, I found myself seated in a mom-and-pop cafe in a small Montana town. I wondered what my purportedly devoted wife was up to, as she must have found that all of her credit cards had been canceled and our bank account was empty. My thoughts were interrupted by an elderly couple at the adjacent table, whose hushed chat I couldn't help but listen. The man, who appeared to be in his late 50s, was telling his red-haired wife about his desire for additional help on their farm. Unfortunately, they could not afford to hire anyone until their present calves were market-ready. Even still, finding someone ready to work for a price they could afford was difficult. After finishing the final mouthful of my dinner, I rose up and approached their table, apologizing for eavesdropping but offering to help them. The elder man examined me, sizing me up. "I don't understand how you could do it. If you heard what we were discussing, you'd know I can't pay you anything. What if I just need a place to stay in exchange for my labor?" I proposed. His eyes narrowed. "Colleen, excuse us for a moment while I speak with this young man outside," he told his wife. He stood up and waited for me to follow him. He turned to face me once we were at the parking lot, where our chat would be private. I guessed him to be around my height, 6 feet, with broad shoulders and no fat. His once dark hair was mostly gray, and his face bore the rough lines of years spent laboring outside. "Who in the hell are you? Are you a part of that Wilson ranch?" he inquired, his tone hinting of mistrust. I lifted my hands defensively, saying, "Hold on, mister. I know nothing about any Wilson. I moved here from Texas 4 days ago and arrived this morning. I figured maybe we could help each other out." He said, "If what you claim is true, why would you want to help us? I cannot afford to pay you. What is in it for you? We don't need any difficulty if you're fleeing the police." I responded, "I'm probably on the run as you put it, but not like you may think." I went on to tell my story about my unfaithful wife wanting to take me to the cleaners and how I needed a place to stay for a time. "I have not robbed or killed anyone. I'm simply attempting to keep what is rightfully mine. If you have a location where I can remain, I will compensate you with my efforts. I'll pay my own way, and if you don't think I'm much assistance, let me know, and I'll be on my way with no hard feelings." He scrutinized my face and replied, "If what you're saying to me is true, I think I'd be a fool not to give you a chance. However, I must inform you that the Wilsons are attempting to convince me to sell them my land. They haven't done anything illegal yet, but I wouldn't put it past them. You might be taking on more than you can handle." I told him that was a risk I was willing to accept. He then asked about my ranching experience, and I was honest, stating that I had spent a few summers on my uncle's ranch in Texas, but I was not a cowboy. He extended his hand and we shook hands to confirm our agreement. He advised me to call him by his first name, Bill, and identify myself. We returned to the diner, where Colleen waited. He yelled out to her, "Colleen, this is Carson. He'll be working for us if he can handle it." She stood and extended her hand. I shook it and she greeted me cordially. "It's very nice to meet you, Carson." Her voice was clear, with possibly a tinge of Irish accent. She was as trim and fit as her husband. "It's nice to meet you too, ma'am," I commented. She said, "My last name is Buckman, but you can just call me Colleen. Formality isn't particularly useful in this section of the country." I was quickly drawn to this charming lady. Bill suggested we go back to the ranch. Before leaving town, he stopped up to a general store, where we both got out of our cars. He suggested I get some ranch-appropriate clothing. When he entered the store, the proprietor greeted him warmly, clearly recognizing him as a regular customer. I purchased a coat and a set of Western-style riding boots. It sufficed for a week. It took around 20 minutes to drive from the general store to the main gate, which was arched with the words Rocking Bee Ranch. Bill's brand name was Rocking Bee. Another mile of private road led to the main home, which was set on a rise. Their 2-story house was well kept and newly painted. Behind it, a barn and several outbuildings became visible. The pickup they drove was partially laden with grocery sacks, indicating a weekly trip into town for supplies. I pulled up behind them, loaded my arms with bags and followed the Buckmans inside the kitchen. In 2 trips, we emptied the vehicle. Bill directed me to drive around the back, where he showed me a little cabin for my stay. As I drove around, I noticed him standing in front of the cabin. When I got out, he pointed to the cabin and indicated that Sam used a similar one a few yards away, adding that Sam was out doing the rounds and I'd see him later. After unpacking my baggage, he waited while I settled into my cabin. It had a single spacious room with a bed against one wall, a table and 2 seats, a potbelly wood burner in one corner, and a bathroom with a single stone shower. It wasn't extravagant, but it was clean and provided me with a good place to remain for the time being, allowing me to hopefully escape being discovered by Janice. When I returned outside, he was sitting in his pickup, telling me to get in. He gave me a tour of the ranch, which included over 6,000 acres of grazing with a few hundred acres dedicated aside for planting winter feed. The ranch's back half, which was mountainous and covered in forest, led to mountains and a stream that ran through the property and was only accessible by horseback. He explained that he used to have 3 full-time employees, but Sam was the only one who remained during difficult times. Sam had been working at the ranch for about 30 years. They employed additional personnel during roundups to pick cattle for the market. He dropped me off at the small cabin. By the way, I noticed you have a laptop. I have a satellite connection with a router, so you can use the internet wirelessly. Supper is in the main house, and we usually eat at 6, he explained before driving away. I was settled in less than 30 minutes, giving me enough time to load up my computer. As he had said, I was able to establish a Wi-Fi connection and rapidly check my emails. Jake sent one message claiming that Janice had reported me missing to the police, who were investigating my absence. It gave me something to think about. Jake was the only person I had told about leaving, and even he had no idea where I was heading. I mailed my resignation to my old company but did not inform them in person of my departure. Just before 6 p.m., I approached the main home and knocked on the door. Bill motioned for me to enter, and as I did, I noticed Colleen preparing lunch as Bill stood to the side, speaking to a man I believed was Sam. Bill motioned me over. "Hi Sam. This is Carson, the new hand I mentioned for today. We'll see how he feels about it tomorrow after a day's work," Bill added, smiling broadly. "Carson, meet Sam." Sam smiled warmly at me and offered his hand. A huge man, at least 6'3", who, like Bill, appeared to have worked hard his entire life and appeared to be about Bill's age. One important detail. He was African American. I shook his hand and felt the power in his grip. "Well, young fellow, we hope you enjoy it here." "I could use some help," he remarked. At 28, I was roughly half his age, so he considered me youthful. I responded, "I intend to give it my best shot." Colleen called us to sit down since supper was ready. Bill and his wife sat at opposite ends of the table, leaving Sam and myself sitting between them, across from each other. On the table was a large platter of pork chops, a large dish of mashed potatoes, another with fresh green beans, and a plate piled high with clearly baked biscuits. "We don't eat fancy here, Carson, but there's plenty, and it's filling," Colleen told him. "It looks great," I said. As we ate, I asked Bill if he had been here his entire life, and he said, "Yes, my grandpa started this ranch and passed it down to my father. It now belongs to both me and Colleen. However, when I was younger, I wasn't sure she'd be a part of it. I had to fight off every man to get her." He looked at his wife, and I could see the intensity of his feelings for her in his eyes. She replied, "Now Bill, you know you're the only man I've ever had feelings for. I just needed to make sure you wanted me enough." Bill subsequently stated, "My wife has been responsible for the 3 happiest days of my life. The day she agreed to marry me, the day she did marry me, and the day she gave birth to our daughter Caitlin. I hadn't seen any signs of a daughter, and Colleen must have seen my curiosity. Our daughter is away right now. She is completing her PhD degree in veterinary sciences at South Dakota State University. She has only been able to return home for the holidays and we are eagerly awaiting her graduation," Colleen explained. "She's supposed to be home in a couple of months," Bill told me. "It'll be nice to have a vet in the family, should cut down on some of the expenses." After supper, I tried to help clean the dishes, but Colleen maintained it was her responsibility and shooed me away. Bill indicated that breakfast was at 5:30 and work would start at 6 o'clock. As Sam and I were leaving, I saw a copy of today's New York Times on the counter, which had most likely been picked up by Bill while in town. I asked to borrow the front page, and he agreed. Once outdoors, I asked Bill to enter my cabin for a bit. Inside, I brought out my digital camera and demonstrated how to operate it. I asked him to snap a close-up of me holding the front page of the newspaper. I could see he was inquisitive, but he did not inquire. He asked about an alarm clock and I told him I had one. He said he'd see me in the morning and then went. I downloaded the image to my computer and composed an email, along with a note to the police in my previous hometown. The message indicated that I was alive and healthy and had left town on my own volition. Choosing a national newspaper over a local one left my whereabouts uncertain. I forwarded the email to Jake and told him to utilize one of the local coffee shops with free internet access. I gave him my password so he could send the original email and image to the police without leaving any trace. This manner, I intended to avoid being added to any FBI or national missing person databases. Assuming the police would not devote significant resources to the search for a wayward husband, I slept soundly that night. The next morning, I got up at 5 o'clock, showered, and dressed in time to walk Sam to the main house. After lunch, Bill told Sam to put me to work fixing fence posts in the hilly portion. Following Sam to the barn, he pointed out a horse and saddle that I would need. He appeared pleased with how I saddled the huge brown horse, drawing on my experience at my uncle's ranch. We then loaded 2 mules with saddle packs, fence posts and a post hole digger. Bill arrived at the barn with a Winchester Model 94 and a saddle scabbard, stating that it was mostly for the rare occasion when we would need to put down a sick cow. Sam and I mounted up and led a mule each, heading up the creek toward the hills. As Sam and I rode, we talked and got to know each other. I told him how I wound up in Montana, confident that he would not violate my trust. In reply, he shared his own experiences. He had married shortly after high school, only to find his ex-wife in bed with another man. In a moment of wrath, he nearly killed the guy, earning a 5-year prison sentence. When he was released, Bill was the only one ready to give him a chance, and that was how he had spent the previous 30 years. Sam praised Bill and Colleen, calling them the salt of the earth. We arrived at the fence that marked the property borders about half an hour later. Sam pointed out that not all of the posts needed to be replaced, but simply those that had decayed or were close to it, which was about every third one. He stayed with me as I replaced the first 2 to verify I was doing everything correctly. He proposed working until around 4 o'clock, giving me enough time to go home, care for the horse and mules and get to dinner at 6 o'clock. His parting advice was to follow the stream back down, so I wouldn't get lost. He went back, leaving me alone with my task. I continued along the line, replacing old posts with new ones. At noon, I took a break and collected the pork chop sandwiches Colleen had given me earlier from my saddlebag. I finished my sandwiches and went back to work. My watch's alarm went off at 4 p.m., and I realized I had set all but a few of the posts that the mules had carried up. Leading the mules, I went back down the fence line until I reached the stream and started descending, right before leaving the trees. I found a natural pool where the water ran in and out. I paused to take in the view, recognizing it as the most beautiful and quiet area on the ranch. Back at the barn, I was able to unsaddle the animals and get them fed on time. While I was looking at the horses, Sam came into bed. We rushed to shower and change before dinner, where we ate steaks. That night, weary, I made little contributions to the discourse and excused myself quickly after supper to go to bed. Sleep arrived fast, and I slept deeply. I woke up hurting all over. My hands ached from using the post hole digger, and my arms, shoulders and legs throbbed. Despite my frequent workouts, there was a significant difference between a 2-hour gym session and a full day of fence post installation. Bill and Sam chuckled as I staggered into the kitchen and winced while sitting down. Even Colleen couldn't keep her grin hidden. Despite the stiffness, I was hungry and gladly consumed my breakfast. "Ready for another day of fencing?" Bill inquired as we rose from the table. I moaned and said, "Yes, sir," trying to sound more positive than I felt. Bill laughed. "I guess you can take it easy today. I would prefer you to ride the rounds with Sam." I nodded gratefully. The first step was to clean the stalls and restock the hay. After putting the horses and mules in the pasture and filling their feeders, we loaded into the pickup and began our ranch inspection. Our major goal was to keep no calves down or removed from their mothers. Sam's knowledge of the ranch appeared instinctive, as he effortlessly predicted where the cattle would be and roughly calculated their numbers. After 30 years, everything appeared to come effortlessly for him. As we approached the far end of the ranch, Sam paused the truck and looked around. Something on one of the hills piqued his interest, so he handed me his binoculars and pointed to a certain location. After a minute, I noticed 2 calves, presumably alone. I asked, "Where are their mothers?" He motioned to 2 cows along the tree line. "That's them over there. Their calves must have strayed into the trees, got lost and continued on. We'll need to pull them down." I inquired, "Are we hiking up there?" "No, it's too far. We'll go back and load up a few horses." The trucks had 2-way radios, so Sam called Bill and told him what we'd observed and that we were on our way to rescue the horses. When we returned to the stable, Bill had already saddled 2 horses and loaded them onto a trailer. All we needed to do was stock up and go. Sam guided us close to the forest line below where the calves were, and we unloaded the horses before riding up into the hills. Sam's 30 years on the ranch became clear once more, as he knew the land like the back of his hand. Half an hour later, We eased up behind the calves and gradually began pushing them back down the slopes. I couldn't help but grin when we cleared the trees and the mischievous kids spotted their mothers. They went wailing to their mothers and instantly found a teat to suckle on. The larger cows stood peacefully, letting their calves to eat. I was struck by how different it was from my childhood. That night's dinner was fried chicken, corn on the cob, and mashed potatoes. With renewed zest, I spoke more than the night before and learned more about Colleen. Her parents moved to the United States from Ireland when she was 5 years old. Her father, captivated by tales of the Old West, had brought the family to Montana, which explains the Irish accent in her speech. Growing up in America, she nevertheless felt the influence of her parents. The next day, feeling much better, I returned after breakfast to replace fence posts. Sam helped me load the mules, but this time I went out on my own. Following the stream took me directly to my objective. This day was easier than the first because I had learnt certain techniques to make the labor less stressful. Just before 4 o'clock, I finished the last post and returned to the barn. With some free time, I worked some of the stalls before cleaning up for dinner. On my 4th day, I assisted Sam in repairing some of the buildings, and the next day, I installed more fence posts. The next 2 months went by, and now it was my turn to ride the ranch and check on the cattle. I was in the best physical form of my life. We worked out a timetable in which Sam took Saturdays off, Bill took Sundays off, and I took Mondays off. I spent my day doing laundry and running into town when needed. I'd become fond of everyone on the property. Sam was kind and easygoing, and we frequently sat and talked after dinner. I had a lot of regard for Bill, who was honest and diligent. We got along well. Colleen was lovely to Sam and me, but I could tell she had some fire in her. She and Bill made a wonderful couple. Colleen and Bill were getting thrilled. Colleen informed me over breakfast on Friday that her daughter would be going home in 1 week. It was my job that day to ride a horse around the wooded area, looking for livestock that had wandered into the hills. A little after 4 o'clock, I made my way to the creek, turned to follow it down, and arrived at the pool below the waterfall. I came to a stop, dismounted, removed my shirt, and knelt beside the stream. I dipped my bandana into the cool water and began washing the perspiration and dust off my face and neck. A whinny from downstream drew my attention, and I turned to my right to see a horse and rider coming. At first, I assumed it was Colleen, but then realized it was a younger version of her. This stunning woman could only be Caitlin, who has the same crystal blue eyes and red hair as her mother. She rode up and came to a stop a few feet away from me. As I rose up to confront her, she replied in a chilly tone, "Who are you and what are you doing on this property?" I said, "The name's Carson, and I work here." She responded, "I do not believe you. My father said he couldn't afford to pay another hand." Despite her beauty, I was growing annoyed by her unpleasant demeanor, so I answered, "Yeah, I heard that too. I guess that's why I chuckle all the way to the bank on payday." She looked at me, reined her horse around and kicked it in the flanks. I chuckled to myself, pulled my shirt back on, remounted my horse and rode towards the barn. Later I discovered there had been a misunderstanding between Caitlin and her parents. They expected her to return the following week, but she arrived just a few hours after I left. She had spent the morning and early afternoon with her parents before expressing her desire to go for a ride, which she had not had time for at school but enjoyed doing. So she saddled up and headed to her favorite location, the waterfall and pool of water. I suppose after 2 months I was old news, and Bill and Colleen had forgotten about me. Just as I returned to the barn, I noticed the redhead's back vanish inside. I dismounted and left my horse inside. Caitlin must have been looking for her father and eventually located him in the barn. I could hear her loud voice as she inquired, "Who is that man that was up at the waterfall?" Bill paused for a moment and said, "That must have been Carson." She went on, "He said he works here, but last time I was here, you told me you couldn't afford to pay another hand." Bill responded, "Well, he's correct, he works here. I don't think it's your business how much he's paid. I'm still running this ranch, young woman." She grumbled, "But he said you pay him so much that he laughs all the way to the bank." By that time, I'd entered the barn. She had her back to me and did not notice me, whereas Bill did. He smiled and continued, "Is that true, Carson? If you believe you are overpaying, I can correct that." She turned around and locked eyes with me. I took off my cap with one hand. I removed my hat with one hand and scratched the back of my head with the other, adding, "Well, I wouldn't want to take advantage of you, Bill. How much are you planning to lower my wages?" At that, Bill and I both burst out laughing. Caitlin, on the other hand, continued to stare at both of us, unable to see the humor. "Sweetheart, just so you get that bee out of your bonnet, Carson gets to stay in the cabin next to Sam's," Bill told her. She answered, "And what else?" Bill replied, "That, and he gets to eat your mother's fine cooking." Caitlin persisted. "So you're claiming you're not paying him? Why should he work for nothing?" Bill said, "He has his reasons, and it's not my place to tell you." I continued. "Working to have a chance to taste your mother's cooking is worth a lot, and I don't think she would like to hear you say that it's nothing." She gave me one last sneer before storming out of the barn. Bill shook his head and commented, "She reminds me so much of her mother when she was younger. I never thought I would be able to tame Colleen." Caitlin joined us for supper that night. She sat next to Sam on the opposite side of the table as me. When I entered the kitchen, she shot me another piercing glare. Before speaking, I waited until everyone's plates were full. I remarked in a nice manner, "Your mother informed me that you have completed your doctorate in veterinary medicine." "Yeah," was her one-word response, delivered without looking up. I added, "Sam claims there's only one other vet in the area, and he's well than 30 miles distant. I'm sure you'll be a valuable asset to the people in this area." She looked up at my compliment and I think I noticed her eyes soften slightly. "Yes, that's Dr. Harrison. He has more business than he can handle and is frequently required to be in multiple locations at once." Colleen then said, "I agree with you, Carson. Our Caitlin will be able to deliver excellent service." Caitlin spent the rest of the lunch talking with her parents and Sam, who had been on the ranch since before she was born. She did not address me directly, and I mostly kept quiet. This was her homecoming, and I knew her parents and Sam wanted to know what had happened in her life while she was gone. When I finished eating, I excused myself and went to bed. I returned to my cabin and checked my email, which showed that I had received one from Jake. He said that he had spoken with a friend on the police force and casually inquired whether they still regarded me as a missing person. His companion stated that everything was dropped once they received the email containing the image I had provided them. Brandon had supposedly dumped Janice as soon as he discovered I had vanished with all of the money, and it didn't look like Janice was going to get any of it. Of course, she couldn't afford the rent in the house where we were staying and was now working as a waitress in a city apartment. She did not have enough money to employ a lawyer to pursue me. I found it ironic. She had clearly married me for my money, and her boyfriend had desired her for the same reason. My money. I was still working on repairing the fence posts. I now only do it every third or fourth day. I had gotten off the hill and was able to drive my pickup to work. It was really easier to load the posts in the rear of the truck than on the mules. The morning after Caitlin got home, I filled the pickup with posts and returned to where I had left off. When it was time for lunch, I wandered to the vehicle and remembered I hadn't brought my food. If any of us were going to be working away from the main home all day, Colleen would make sure we had lunch, and I think I forgot to pick mine up. I could have driven back to the house, but I figured missing one supper wouldn't kill me. A half hour later, I had just put a pole and was attaching the wire when I heard a car approach. I looked back and noticed it was one of the ranch pickups. The truck came to a stop just as I completed writing that post. I turned around and was astonished to see Caitlin exit. She was holding a tiny sack, similar to the ones Colleen used for our lunches. "Mama said you forgot your lunch," she remarked, pushing the bag at me. I leaned out to take it from her. "Thank you, Caitlin." "That was very nice of you," I said. I looked in the bag and saw 2 sandwiches, as usual. I took one out and gave her the other, but she declined. I shrugged my shoulders, sat on the truck's tailgate and began eating. She strolled up to where I was, about 5 feet to the side, and simply stared. I ate silently, keeping my eyes focused in front of me. "Why are you here?" she inquired last. I turned to look at her and decided to tease her. "Don't tell anyone, but I robbed a bank and hid the money. I'm hiding out here till the heat goes off and I can get the money." Her eyes widened briefly before glaring at me. "You're a real clown," she muttered before turning to leave. I waited until she was halfway to her truck before calling her. She paused and slowly turned around, and I continued. "I married a lady who never loved me and simply wanted what I could provide for her. I came here because I wanted to be away from all I knew for a bit." She glanced at me again, and I believe she realized I was telling the truth this time. She nodded and departed without saying anything else. As she drove away, I remembered what her father had said about her mother being like her when she was that age. He claimed to have tamed her, but I suspected the real secret was their love for each other. It had been less than 24 hours since I first met Caitlin, and I couldn't fathom a guy taming that fiery redhead. That night's supper was almost identical to the previous nights. Caitlin had chats with both her parents and Sam. I didn't feel slighted because she didn't know me and we didn't have anything in common. We were just finishing dinner when there was a knock on the door, which Bill went to answer. He entered the kitchen, followed by a man of my age. He was what ladies would describe as tall, dark, and gorgeous. Caitlin eagerly screamed out his name, leaped out of her seat and hugged him. It was clear they knew each other. They were talking about how long it had been since they had seen one other. A few minutes later, there was another tap on the door, and Bill went to answer it, returning with another man, this time fair-haired but also attractive. Caitlin greeted him with similar warmth. I remembered Bill telling me that he had to fend off every male surrounding him in order to win his wife. Caitlin was every bit as attractive as her mother. I excused myself from the table and went back to my cabin, mentally wishing the two guys luck. Nonetheless, I envied them. If Caitlin turned out to be the lady her mother was, whoever gained her heart would be a fortunate guy. The next day, I drove the pickup around the ranch. By the time I finished my rounds, something didn't seem to add together. It was early enough that I returned to get Sam, and we had a quick tour of the property. There were a lot of cattle scattered over the ranch, but he agreed that something didn't seem right. It just seemed like we were missing a few herds. We decided to saddle up the following day and tackle the hilly parts. We discussed it with Bill at supper that night and he agreed with our approach. It poured that night, making finding traces more difficult. The next morning we placed our horses into a trailer and Bill drove us to one end of the property. I rode approximately a third of the way up the tree line, while Sam rode another third higher. We then traveled across the ranch, across the hills, and through the trees. It took a significant portion of the day to reach the far side. We counted 5 wandering herds. Bill greeted us as we emerged from the hills, and we loaded the horses into the trailer and proceeded back. We reviewed the situation and concluded that the only thing we could do was become more vigilant. Caitlin received a call from another suitor during dinner that night. I overheard her mother say something about it being the third one that day. Guys were coming out of the woodwork to get her attention as word spread that she had returned home. We spent the next 4 days observing the herd. Everything appeared to be fine, with the exception of the alleged original loss. Caitlin's suitors made repeated visits. She'd been home for a week and hadn't spoken to me since the day she delivered my lunch. On the 5th day following the cattle's apparent disappearance, I told Bill I wanted to ride the property line across the hills. We had already covered the fence lines throughout the grazing regions and found no evidence that the missing cattle had passed through them. Sam dropped me off on the west side of the ranch. This was where Bill's ranch met the Wilson Ranch. About halfway to the southwest corner, I noticed 3 new sets of horse footprints. They crossed from Wilson's side of the fence to Bill's. The fact that the fence wire was still up seemed strange. I dismounted and examined the fence posts, discovering that the staples had loosened on 5 posts and were barely holding the wire up. Remove the staples and lower the wire so you may cross over. After reinstalling the wire and staples, everything appeared normal. I remounted and followed the traces. When I approached the stream, I noticed 3 horses tied to a tree a short distance above the waterfall. I was still approximately 30 yards distant. I hurriedly got down, hitched my horse to a tree and took the gun out of its sheath. When I neared the horses, I noticed boot prints leading downstream. I crept up to the waterfall's brink, peered down, and gasped. Caitlin was naked in the water, as if she had just been born. I was captivated by the scene. She was swimming across the water, her naked body clearly visible in the pure water. Damn. She had an adorable ass. A movement in the trees to her right brought me back to consciousness. I rapidly examined the area, noticing 1 guy on the right and 2 more near the pond on the left. I raised my firearm and fired. The bullet struck the guy on the right at his feet. 1 more fast pull on the trigger and the earth burst near the 2 people on the left. Caitlin let out a blood-curdling scream that resonated throughout the trees. I stood up where everyone could see me and said, "On your bellies immediately. I'm not going to miss the next shot. Caitlin, stay just where you are." She didn't notice the 3 men. All she saw was me standing over her, holding a rifle, and she scrambled to conceal herself. One of the men on the left flinched as if he was about to flee, but the bark on the tree next to him erupted as I pressed the trigger again. He was persuaded and dropped flat. Caitlin noticed the 2 men around the location of my shot. She screamed again. I began counting down, and before I could say 1, the other 2 dropped down. I instantly commanded them to place their hands behind their heads, which they did. I hurriedly begged Caitlin to go and get dressed. She tried to resist, but I hissed at her to do as I said. She was plainly terrified, and I could see her shivering from where I was, but she followed orders and walked out of the pool like Venus emerging from the sea. Even though she had her back to me, I couldn't take my gaze away from her. I'd never forget her alabaster skin and wonderfully rounded buttocks. She slipped on her jeans and blouse, swung up upon her horse and disappeared through the trees with a single kick. When she left, I told the men to get up, lie down, and put their hands behind their heads. Only when all three laid before me did I let out a sigh of relief. I thought it was time to bluff. So, what will I do with you three? I suppose I could just shoot you in the legs and watch you bleed to death. The three men began begging me to spare them. I continued. Even if I spare you, Caitlin's father will assure justice when I inform him of your horrible plans for his daughter. Unless, of course, you have a more compelling confession for the sheriff, such as cattle rustling. It may result in jail time, but it will at least give you a chance at life. The tiniest of them cracked. Yes, we accomplished it. Wilson claimed that breaking Buckman would safeguard his land. His colleague hushed him to silence up, but he shouted, I ain't dying for no damn cows. I chose to purchase more time because I expected Caitlin to return soon and her father to conduct an investigation. As expected, 45 minutes later, Bill and Sam galloped into view. I signaled them down, and they dashed up to join me atop the rise. What in the hell is happening? Bill required. It looks like some of Wilson's hands paid us an unexpected visit. I trailed them from the barrier to here. Caitlin was swimming when these three tried to creep up on her. I looked over and pushed the barrel of my rifle to the smaller man's neck. I believe this one has something he wants to confess to you. When I prodded him again, he whimpered. We did it. We took some of your cattle, but Wilson forced us. Bill tipped his cap back, smirking at Sam, and added, You know, when my grandfather ran this ranch they used to hang horse thieves and cattle rustlers. Sometimes justice appears simpler back then. Unfortunately, we have to be civilized these days. While Sam stood guard, Bill and I decided to lead the rustlers back down. With rifles in hand, we followed them, Sam tying their horses together and bringing up the rear. When we arrived at the buildings, we escorted the rustlers into the barn, separating them into stalls with open doors so we could keep an eye on them without seeing one another. Bill went into the home to summon the sheriff, while Sam and I stood guard. In less than 30 minutes, the sheriff rushed up the mile-long driveway. Bill met him and briefed him on the current occurrences. I suggested bringing out the lesser offender first for the sheriff to question, and he agreed. I instantly took my prisoner outside. Initially apprehensive, the small rustler appeared to reconsider his quiet and began speaking. The sheriff glanced at Bill and stated, It appears we have a straightforward case of trespassing here. Honestly, it's a waste of my time, but I suppose I could leave them in your capable hands. Forget I saw them, and I'll let you handle the situation. The terrified rustler's eyes widened and he abruptly opened up. The sheriff soon discovered the truth and called for assistance. Soon, a convoy of sheriff cars rolled into Wilson's huge ranch. Despite its vast size, the sheriff pinpointed the spot provided by the rustler and discovered nearly 100 stolen cattle with the rocking bee mark. Wilson and his cohorts were jailed before the end of the day. We didn't get together for meals until after 9 p.m., despite the chaos. Caitlin, despite sitting at the table, kept her gaze fixated on her plate. What were you doing out there? Bill queried, addressing her, as he hadn't had much time to speak with her. I was just swimming. I didn't think anyone would come and spy on me, she said accusingly. I interjected, First of all, Caitlin, I was not spying on you. I followed their horse trails to the water. Second, contemplate what would have happened if I had not been present. I doubt the three were planning a picnic when they spotted you swimming shirtless. Colleen said, Thank goodness you arrived when you did, Carson. I shudder to think about what may have happened. The discussion changed, and we rapidly completed our lunch, cognizant of the early start the next day. Caitlin cried out to me as she exited the kitchen and headed toward my cabin. I came to a halt and waited as she rudely asked, So did you enjoy the view today? Expecting thanks proved too idealistic, so I said, Let's just say I'd be dishonest if I claimed it wasn't breathtaking. She huffed and turned on her heels, heading towards the house. I stood there, shaking my head, admitting that there was something about me that always drew her in. The next day, Bill had to travel into town to submit formal charges against Wilson. Returning the stolen animals to their appropriate place would take many days because the prosecutor needed to fully document the case first. Sam and I spent the day renewing the paint on a few of the barns. We had lunch in the kitchen, but Caitlin elected not to join us, which suited me perfectly. Bill arrived in the early afternoon, but waited until dinner to discuss the developments. He stated that because this was not a capital case, Wilson and his accomplices will be released on bond. While he did not foresee any further trouble, he advised us to be cautious. He looked at his daughter, grinned mischievously and added, "If you're planning another naked swim anytime soon, maybe you should bring Carson along for protection." Her face flushed pink again, and she sputtered as she stood and dashed into the room. Bill and Sam burst out laughing, and Colleen couldn't help but giggle. I laughed along with them. After the laughter died down, we resumed our lunch. Bill continued his light-hearted mocking. "I sincerely want to thank you, Carson. Wilson might have gravely damaged the ranch's finances. You are worth every penny." We all had another round of laughter. 3 days later, Bill received word that he could retrieve his livestock. We loaded 3 horses into a trailer and traveled to Wilson's Flying Doll Ranch with a sheriff's escort. Colleen came along to drive the truck and trailer back after we unloaded the horses. Bill, Sam and I began pushing the cows back to his ranch. As we approached the Rocking Bee Ranch, I rode ahead and loosened a portion of the fence line, allowing the cattle to cross. After verifying that all of the cattle were back where they belonged, we secured the fencing and rode back to the main house, pleased with our day's labor. During this period, Caitlin applied for her veterinarian license. Because the licensing process generally took around 45 days, she could only care for the animals on her father's property for the time being. I'd see her throughout the property and, of course, around dinner. Despite her continued silence, if I managed to catch her eye, I'd give her a huge grin and wiggle my brows, which would always make her blush. 2 weeks after the waterfall event, we found ourselves in the barn together and I inquired, "Have you been swimming lately?" She approached just inches away and glared at me. "Why are you such an asterisk hole?" I shrugged, grinned and asked, "Why are you such a b asterisk ch?" Her right hand aimed for my face, but I moved quickly, seizing her wrist before she could strike. Undeterred, she attempted with her left, but I caught it as well. I pushed both hands behind her back, trapping them and pressing her body against mine. I slowly dropped my face toward hers. She stared at me, making no attempt to break away. I continued. "If you were mine, I'd put you over my knee and spank your butt." She attempted to back away, saying, "You wouldn't dare." I loosened my grip and she went backward, resting on her buttocks. "I'm not saying I wouldn't dare. I just got rid of one woman who doesn't care about me, and I'm not going to waste my time with another one." Normally she was the one to storm out, but this time, it was my turn. I left the barn and left her sitting on the ground. I didn't see her again till supper. She didn't say anything to me, as expected, but the look she gave me was incomprehensible. Not that I ever claimed to understand women. My marriage to Janice showed this. The next day, I was in the barn caring for the stalls when Bill entered. Knowing it was his day off on Sunday, I assumed he wanted to talk. I wondered whether Caitlin had told him about the previous day's episode, and if he had come to urge me to leave. I paused my work as he approached. He continued. "I heard you and Caitlin had a little showdown yesterday." That addressed my query about whether Caitlin confided in her father, but I observed a twinkle in his eyes. "Well, I suppose you could say that." "Probably my fault," I said. He went on to say, "Maybe not. I believe her problem is that she doesn't know what to make of you. She believed you were here for something, but you ended up being the hero who saved her and the property. What she can't understand is why you aren't pursuing her like the other local young men. Caitlin, like her mother at her age, is used to having boys wrapped around her little finger. She's had several boyfriends, but none of them lasted. I don't believe she truly respected them. I hope you don't let her chase you away. In my opinion, you are welcome to stay here for as long as you wish." I said, "Thank you, Bill. That means a lot to me. As for Caitlin, I'll stop taunting her, and perhaps we can live and let live." He exited the barn, and I resumed my job. I had the rest of the day to think over Bill's statements. If Caitlin wanted to understand me, she should act civilly and engage in conversation rather than her current approach. Pursuing her like the others was simply not an option. She did not join us for supper that night, a topic no one brought up, and I did not investigate. The next day, I stuck to my schedule, waking up at 5 a.m., despite the fact that it was my day off. After breakfast, Sam and Bill left for work, and I went to get my laundry. Bill had invested in a large commercial washer and dryer, which allowed me to wash all of my clothes in one load. The laundry room was next to the kitchen, so I ate and talked with Colleen at the kitchen table while my clothes were being washed. Caitlin entered, which was unusual for breakfast as she generally ate later. Colleen inquired about my plans for the day and I informed her that I was thinking of traveling into town. I then inquired if she wanted me to pick up anything for her. She suggested that if I didn't mind, I could get a few things for her. I assured her that I didn't mind at all. Just then Caitlin said, "Cool, I'll bike into town with you." I had planned to go to the general store for a few items and it seems like a waste of petrol for both of us to go separately. I looked up in surprise and replied, "Sure, I'd be happy to give you a lift." After yesterday, I didn't expect her to talk to me, let alone want to go somewhere with. I responded, "I'll be leaving in about an hour and a half after my laundry is done and put away." She told me she'd be prepared. She finished preparing something to eat and sat at the table, sitting quiet as Colleen and I talked. As I stepped out of my cabin, she appeared from the back door, dressed in a turquoise sundress that complemented her red hair. It was clear she wanted me to notice her. I held the passenger side door open for her and watched as she slid into the car. We set out and for the first half of the journey, she sat peacefully, admiring the scenery. Suddenly she said, "I thought you were going to kiss me yesterday." I looked at her, but she appeared to be staring out the side window, so I couldn't see her face. I responded, "Well, while that may not have been unpleasant, I do have a rule about not forcing unwanted affections upon unreceptive females." I noticed her head swivel around in the corner of my eye and knew she was looking at me. She sat silently, but I saw her occasional peek in my direction. We parked into the general shop and stepped inside. I needed to get a couple of new pairs of jeans and shirts, and she had a list of what her mother wanted. An hour later, we had everything loaded. I had one more stop at the hardware shop to get a few items for Bill, but it was midday and I was hungry. I suggested we stop for a bite to eat and she agreed. We parked into the same cafe where I'd originally met Bill and Colleen. We chose a table across from one another and ordered our meals. As we sat in silence, I began to wonder if I should have simply gone to the hardware shop and returned to the ranch. Just suddenly the door slid open and 3 men entered. I recognized 2 of them as the guys who had come to see Caitlin. They rushed to our table, with 2 taking seats on either side of her and a third standing behind me. They ignored me and began talking to her. I rose up and motioned for the third person to have a seat as I proceeded to the next table. When the waitress brought our meals, I motioned for her to place my dish in front of me. I ate quickly and paid no attention to the talk at Caitlin's table. I stood up after tossing some money on the table to cover our lunch. Caitlin had barely touched her lunch, yet her plate was still full. "I'm going to rush to the hardware shop. I can come back by later and see if you're ready to go," I added, interrupting their chat. She pushed her plate back, stood up and said, "It was nice seeing you guys again, but we have to go." The guys at the table attempted to protest, with one even offering her a lift home. She declined and accompanied me outside to my SUV. As we drove to the hardware shop, she remained in the car, looking to fume. The hushed tension remained as we drove back to the property. She turned off the highway onto the mile-long road and questioned, "Why did you do that?" "What?" I replied, unsure of what she was pointing out. "Moving to the other table," she said. "Oh, that. Well, I assumed you'd rather spend time with your buddies. Besides, I didn't want to be in the center of their battle for your attention." "You really are in a hole," she exclaimed. I wisely chose to keep my mouth shut. I had no desire to avoid her slaps while driving. As we approached the main home, she grabbed whatever she could carry as soon as I opened the SUV's back door. I collected several more bags and followed her inside the house. As I walked in the back door, she put everything on the kitchen table without saying anything to her mother before storming out of the room. Colleen glanced at me quizzically. I shrugged and said, "I guess I'm in a hole." Colleen laughed and stepped closer, placing her hand on my arm. "I have never seen anyone have the effect on Caitlin that you seem to have." "I guess I was born to just piss her off," I told her. "I'm not so sure about that," she said, confusing me. I returned to my cabin and stored my new clothes. I decided not to stay indoors and went to the barn to saddle a horse. Setting out, I ended up at the top of the waterfall. With the weather beautiful, I tied the horse to a tree and sat on the edge of the falls, staring down at the tranquil pool. Caitlin rode up underneath me after about a half hour, if not more. I got off her horse, not wanting to be accused of spying in case she went skinny dipping again, and flung a stone into the water, making a splash. She looked around for the source of the noise and found me. Anticipating her departure, she mounted her horse and rode up to where I was sitting. She hitched her horse next to mine and approached me. I rose up, moving a few steps away from the edge in case she intended to shove me off. "You're in a *** hole," she exclaimed, stopping inches from me. "And you're still a *** chi," I replied. This time, I wasn't waiting for her slap. I grabbed her waist and kissed her. I quickly released her and attempted to proceed towards my horse, but she grabbed my arm and turned me back around. I was surprised when she reached behind my neck and drew me in for another kiss. We found ourselves in a passionate kiss again. As the passion mounted, our garments went, and we had a great time. Our breathing gradually returned to normal, and we lingered silently in each other's arms. We got dressed, mounted our horses, and went back down. After stabling our mounts, she turned and headed to the main house without saying anything. In a fog, I returned to my cabin and slipped into the shower. One thing became clear. I had much deeper affections for this attractive woman than I had previously admitted to myself. I hardly had time to dress for dinner. When I entered the kitchen, Bill, Colleen, and Sam were already there, but Caitlin was nowhere to be found. As we took our seats, she stepped in and chose the chair near my rather than her customary spot next to Sam. Bill and Colleen exchanged glances, and Caitlin simply smiled charmingly in response. She talked animatedly during dinner. Despite their interest, her parents did not inquire as to why their daughter was in such a good mood. After supper, Jane helped her mother clean the kitchen as Sam and I returned to our cabins. Just as I was getting comfortable between the sheets, a quiet knock on my door rang out. I opened the door, wearing only my boxers, and Caitlin crept inside, finding her way into my arms. We exchanged a sweet kiss and she led me back to my bed, joining me after taking off her clothing. Again, we made love before falling asleep in one another's arms. The sudden arrival of 5 a.m. forced me to groggily reach over and deactivate the alarm. With much reluctance, I got out of bed. I illuminated the bathroom and dressed for the day, kissing her on the head before leaving the cabin. During breakfast, I couldn't avoid Bill and Colleen's scrutinizing eyes. I wondered if they were aware of their daughter's nighttime activities. Following the dinner, I loaded the pickup for another day of fence post installation. Working alone on a ranch provided plenty of time for thought. My mind strayed to my recent past, shocked that it had only been 3 months since I left my wife. It seemed like an eternity. I reflected on the relevance of Bill, Colleen, and Sam in my life. Then my thoughts turned to the lovely Caitlin and the shared experiences from the previous day. I considered the idea of discovering the love her parents embodied. At lunch, I discovered I hadn't brought my dinner. As the thought crossed my head, I heard a pickup approaching quickly. Caitlin jumped out, racing toward me with a suitcase in her hand. She threw herself at me, commencing a passionate kiss before handing me the bag. I ignored the dinner and drew her in for another passionate kiss. Although I did not lay as many fence posts that day, I did place my post in her a few times. In between our passionate times, we found time to converse. I revealed information about my prior life, including how my ex-wife had betrayed me. "I'll only leave if you tell me to," I promised her. She ultimately returned home, and I finished the day's work. She was in the kitchen when I arrived, having just showered and changed, and she had chosen the seat next to mine once more. A knock on the front door interrupted our dinner. Bill answered it and returned with the same person who had first called Caitlin. Caitlin gazed at him with an unreadable face as soon as he sat down. "I was wondering if you'd like to go for a drive," he proposed. In this region of the country, where options were limited, taking a drive was effectively a euphemism for going on a date. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't think my boyfriend would like it," Caitlin said. She leaned down and kissed my cheek. Mr. Tall, dark and handsome reddened and stammered before hurrying out. With that exchange, our relationship was officially out in the open. I noticed Bill and Colleen smiling with satisfaction. One had a huge grin. We had officially formed a pair. In the days that followed, Caitlin received no further visits from local men. She made it obvious that she was unavailable. I found a way to help her with her ambitions. She was looking for a bank loan to buy equipment for her veterinarian practice. The bank was hesitant to make an unsecured loan, so the only option was for her father to pledge the ranch as security. She hesitated to question him. I advised waiting a few days. I could have a solution. I phoned my offshore bank and opened an account in the name of a bogus loan company. Caitlin completed a loan application on my computer, which I had set up to send to my email. After a few days, I notified her that her loan was accepted and that a wire transfer will be made to her account. She was overjoyed with the news, but she wondered why the loan had only a 2% yearly interest rate. I mentioned that they were a non-profit philanthropic organization that made loans to persons they believed would benefit the community. I might have just offered her the money, but I knew she was too proud to accept it. After obtaining her degree through hard effort, she was determined to achieve on her own terms. By the time her license was accepted, she had purchased a new van that had been converted into a mobile veterinarian office, equipped with all essential medical equipment. As word spread about her licensed position, local ranchers began requesting her services. Caitlin and I spent several nights together in my cabin. Although Bill and Colleen were aware, they appeared to have no objections. At 27, she was grown enough to make her own choices. It took 3 months for Wilson and his crew to stand trial. The case was rather easy. The tiniest man cooperated with the prosecution and was sentenced to 2 years probation with no prison time. Wilson's other 5 employees were sentenced to 5 years in jail each. Wilson, the mastermind behind the rustle, received the maximum 10-year sentence and a $50,000 fine. When he was transported to prison, I began an inquiry into him and his ranch, discovering that he was unmarried and had no family in the region. With all of his hands incarcerated, no one was left to administer the property. This prompted me to devise a fresh idea. However, before I could get started, I had some unfinished business to attend to. I needed to formalize my divorce. I couldn't accept Janice taking half of my money. To accomplish this, I went to my friend Jake for assistance once more. Instead of sending an email, I called and requested him to speak with Janice. I wanted him to know that I had sought out and offered a settlement in exchange for a divorce. The offer was straightforward, $50,000. If she declined, she would never hear from me again or receive any money. Initially acting innocent, she demanded to know why I had left and why I would not return. Jake disclosed that I was aware of her affair with Brandon and she intended to divorce me, bringing the charade to an end. With her game revealed, Janice, who was still working as a waitress and struggling financially, agreed to my offer. To proceed, I needed to return to Texas and hire a lawyer to prepare the divorce paperwork. Caitlin was not pleased when I informed her of my departure. I stated that I needed to end this chapter in my life and told her that I would return. She persisted in taking me and waiting for me when I returned, despite my initial plan to leave my vehicle in long-term parking at the airport. Leaving behind my SUV and most of my stuff, with the exception of what fit in one suitcase, appeared to alleviate her anxieties. I left on a Sunday, and when I arrived, Jake met me at the airport. I called Caitlin every night while I was staying with him and his family. By Friday, all of the paperwork was completed. Jake accompanied Janice to my lawyer and explained that she would receive a $10,000 check right away, with the rest $40,000 due 60 days after the divorce was finalized. She signed the paperwork, and my lawyer handed her the $10,000 payment. I never had to confront Janice. Then I realized I had personal goods in storage, including souvenirs and antiques from my parents, yearbooks and other sentimental belongings. I didn't want to return for them later, so I rented a moving van and loaded it up. Caitlin was surprised when I told her I wasn't flying back, but once I explained that I was bringing back everything significant to me, her joy rose. It took me 3 days of unrelenting driving to complete the distance. On Tuesday evening, as I arrived at the Rocking Bee Ranch, everyone greeted me enthusiastically. That night, Caitlin extended her warm greeting until early in the morning, when we finally fell asleep, fatigued. With the first part of my strategy completed, I was ready to put the rest into action. This required multiple journeys to the prison where Wilson was imprisoned. My goal was to persuade him to sell me the property. I persisted in presenting my point, despite my initial resistance. I explained that he would be imprisoned for at least 7 years, and that even if he behaved well, he would not be eligible for parole. With no one to care for his ranch, his house and buildings would surely decay, and his animals would perish without proper care in the winter. I also questioned if he would be welcome back following his conviction. Faced with the danger of ruin, he eventually accepted my offer, which gave him something to start over with upon release. The next stage was to secure money. I transferred my funds back into the nation, sure that Janice would not imperil her $40,000 by taking reckless steps. I negotiated a price of $5 million with Wilson, which was lower than the property's true value, making financing reasonably easy to obtain. I placed a $500,000 down payment and financed the remainder. Taking a month to perfect things, I kept my activities hidden from everyone except Caitlin and Bill. I mentioned to them that I had personal business with my possessions that required consideration. Although it only took 1 or 2 days out of my week, I formed a corporation and registered the land in its name. With summer finishing and fall approaching, I hired someone to harvest the hay on the property. Furthermore, I hired 4 people to reside on site and operate the ranch in the meantime. The most experienced worker was designated as interim foreman. I stressed that, despite my close proximity, I would be an absentee owner for some time. I assured him that he could always reach me via phone, and that I intended to visit the ranch frequently. My final concept included remodeling the main house, which was a 2-story 5-bedroom structure that needed to be modernized. Despite Caitlin's unhappiness with my opacity regarding my activities, our relationship thrived. Every day my feelings for her became stronger, and I sensed that she felt the same way about me. Meanwhile, her veterinary practice grew, requiring her to travel frequently, but she remained pleased and happy. I almost told her what I was doing. When she returned after checking on the remodeling, she surrounded me with questions. "What the hell's going on, Carson? Are you seeing anyone else?" I said, "God, no. I swear there's no one else. I only have a few things to get done. Please believe me. I promise to tell you everything soon. I'm asking you to trust me." She examined my face, looking for the truth, and said, "Okay, Carson. I do trust you, but you better tell me what's going on soon, or I'm going to kick your ass." I grabbed her and kissed her with all my affection. As spring arrived and the calving season began, the main house renovation was finished. It was time to carry out the final component of my strategy. One afternoon, when I had Caitlin alone, I asked her to go for a drive. "I've been thinking it's time for me to leave the Rocking Bee Ranch," I told the girl. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she replied, "But I promised I wouldn't leave." I had scheduled it so that we would arrive at the former Flying Doll Ranch entrance. I turned in and began driving down the quiet road. "I wasn't really planning on going far," I informed him. She looked about, bewildered. I was not sure if she had heard what I said. Then she said, "What are we doing on Wilson's land?" I waited until we were at the main home before responding. I invited her to come on, as I wanted to show her something. I got out of the truck and walked around to open her door. Taking her hand, I took her to the front door and opened it. She inquired again, "What the heck are you doing? We could be in danger for this." I encouraged her to relax, that Wilson no longer owned the ranch and that we should take a look around. I wanted to know what she thought about the house. I brought her upstairs, then we walked through the bedrooms and back down. There was a huge living room, a finely paneled den, 2 rooms used as home offices, and finally the kitchen. Her expression indicated that she adored the new kitchen. There was only one room with furnishings, which I wanted to use as my office. The rest of the house awaited her judgment on how to furnish it. I asked her what she thought of the house, and she responded it was really good. When I asked if she believed she could live there, she said, "What the hell?" I could see she was puzzled and upset. I fell on one knee and reached into my jacket pocket. I stated to her, "Wilson no longer owns the ranch, I do, and I'm asking if you could live there as my wife." She asked in a startled tone if I owned the house, and I nodded enthusiastically. She cried, "Yes!" I then removed the engagement ring from my pocket, held it up and proposed to her. Her face screwed up and her eyes welled with tears. I believed I had made a mistake until she tackled me to my back and kissed my face. She then offered me her finger so that I could place the ring on her. She surveyed the place with fresh eyes, running from room to room and inspecting everything. I waited anxiously for her to come running back into my arms. "The house is gorgeous. I love it," she exclaimed eagerly. I escorted her across the room to 2 doors that went into a hallway. "There are 2 offices, one for you to run your business from and one for me," I explained, earning me another long kiss. I walked her into the office with the desk and took out a large sheet of paper. It depicted a property gate and said, "Double C Ranch." She took a look at it and wondered what the double C indicated. I informed her that it stands for Carson and Caitlin Ranch. She cried and began tugging at my clothes, and I joined in stripping her naked. I set her on top of the desk and dedicated the workplace to her love. In fact, in the days ahead, we made love in every room of our new home. After we had recovered and dressed, I informed her it was time to inform her parents. She was so delighted I believe she floated out to the truck. We returned a few minutes after 6 and Bill, Colleen and Sam were already in the kitchen preparing supper. When we stepped in, Caitlin lifted out her left hand and squealed, "We're getting married!" Colleen sprang up and raced over to hug her kid, while Bill and Sam approached and pumped my hand and stroked my back. My future mother-in-law then grabbed me tightly, while Caitlin hugged her father and Sam. When everything settled down, we all sat down to eat. Caitlin waited until everyone had eaten. Of course, this means we will be moving, she stated as casually as possible. What? Shouted Bill, Colleen and Sam together. She stared at me and urged me to tell them, so I responded, well, Bill, you remember how Wilson wanted to combine his ranch with yours? I was thinking it may be a good idea. Bill got up, enraged, and exclaimed, there's no way in hell the flying doll is going to get his ranch. I smiled and told him to relax. It was no longer the flying doll, but the Double C Ranch, and the new owners were sitting at his table right now. In confusion, he inquired, what are you talking about? I informed him I had bought out Wilson and that the ranch now belonged to Caitlin and me, Double C, Carson, and Caitlin. Colleen claimed she received it immediately away. I answered, Bill, I thought we could run the two ranches together. We'd split the profits 50-50ths. He continued. But the Double C Ranch is over twice the size of my ranch, and it brings in a lot more profit. I said, you've done this your entire life, I need your assistance. I'd like us to be equal partners. You'd be in command of the operations and anything you say goes. Besides, it's also part of Caitlin's property. It will be keeping everything inside the family. He sat down and gazed at Colleen. She nodded her head. He shook hands with me across the table. Damn it, Carson, this is going to take some getting used to, but I accept your offer. I explained, this means we'll have additional hands to oversee and Sam will be the head foreman. And now I get to remove all of those fence posts I worked so hard to install on that side of the property. Everybody laughed at me. That night's supper was a noisy celebration. Caitlin spent the night in my cabin and exhausted me. We arrived late for breakfast the next morning, but no one had left the kitchen. They were waiting for us to eat so that we could all go over to the Double C Ranch, where Caitlin could show off our new home. Everyone was impressed, and I noticed Colleen looking enviously at the restored kitchen. Caitlin and her mother spent a month furnishing the house. It was ready to move in on our wedding night. We were married at the Double C Ranch. Bill and his family were respected and well-liked, and ranchers and their families from all over came to celebrate the occasion. As Caitlin's spouse, Bill's son-in-law, and the new owner of Double C Ranch, I was welcomed into their community. We finally made it to bed later that night and stayed there for the majority of the next day, making love. We would still be there, but on the third day of our marriage, I brought my bride to Fiji for a tropical honeymoon. Our first roundup that year was a success, as we sold a large number of cattle for a profit. A substantial amount went into repaying the debt, but with Caitlin's business, we were able to make a good living. We even bought Sam a wonderful new house, and he now has a girlfriend around his age who lives in town. We may have another wedding soon. Another year has passed and my lovely wife has just told me the most wonderful news. She is pregnant. We are going to have a baby. One last word before I leave. I know some may argue that I should have learned my lesson the first time and had Caitlin sign a prenuptial agreement. If that's the case, you really haven't met my Caitlin. She is not Janice. She works hard at her profession and cares for our home. She is her mother's daughter, and she expresses her affection to me every day. With only me. Every day I look into her blue Irish eyes and see that love.